Previously on Elements of Justice.
We've decided that we need to basically rebuild the whole bloody product from the ground up. So that means that we don't have a rendering pipeline. We don't have anything to render with. And because there's nothing to render with, because we can't render, that means we can't make any episodes. So, unfortunately, EOJ is going to go on the hiatus and is not likely to return until 2025.
Yeah, about that. Hey folks, it's CitizenWolf here. Just a quick message before we actually get into the main part of the podcast. Now, initially on Twitter, a few days ago at least, I did announce that I was going to split this episode into two separate parts, simply because the original recording was nearly 4 hours long. As I say, Mr. G was an absolute joy to talk to, and we barely scratched the surface of all the topics that we could have possibly discussed regarding the EOJ project. It was an absolute blast to talk to him, and he's basically a podcaster's dream. You can talk to him for hours and hours on end, and it just flies by like that. But the downside is, at least in terms of the MP3 format I have to use anyway, the website I use imposes a hard 200 megabyte limit that I have to use when uploading MP3 files onto the audio version of the podcast. And of course, there's only so much you can cram into an audio file before we have to start crushing the bitrate. Now, I believe I've made just enough justifiable cuts here and there on bits that are not really important, like bits of dead air and things like that. I've managed to find just enough audio savings, I believe anyway, touch wood, to get the whole podcast into one single audio file, and it makes it a lot easier for everybody. I didn't really want to split it if I could absolutely help it, so I did take some editorial cuts here and there, but nothing major that you'll miss anyway. But other than that, the podcast is pretty much intact. But just wanted to clarify that. As I say, I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed recording this episode. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to Mr. G. Please do listen to the whole thing, and I will try and get him on the show once again at some point. But thank you for listening, everybody, and thank you to the new listeners who are just tuning in to find out more about EOJ and so on. So thank you for listening, folks. Oh, and by the way, there is going to be spoiler discussions regarding Case 2 and 3, so if none of you have watched EOJ, please watch it first before listening to this podcast. You have been warned. Good afternoon, listeners and viewers. Welcome to another edition of the CitizenWolf audio podcast. This is episode 18 you're listening to. Oh my God, we've got a doozy for you. Today, we've got a very special Galacon special, if you like. I'll be talking to Mr. G, the director and current owner of the EOJ project. I was very fortunate to see him do the presentation live back in Galacon in Germany, talking about the EOJ project and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces in between. So how's it going? Thank you for coming on to the podcast, despite we'll be talking about the elephant in the room, I suppose. Let's just call it that way before we talk into that. But how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's a pleasure to sort of catch up again. Especially since Galacon. I haven't truly recovered since Galacon, truthfully. I'm still in the post-Galacon not rut, so to speak, but every day now I feel like I need 20 more hours sleep than I actually get in order to function. Worth it, 100% worth it, but boy howdy, does travel take it out of you. Does it ever?
Do you do conventions frequently, or was that the first one you've actually ever done for an MLP stuff?
So usually I'm at UK PonyCon. That's usually my regular stomping ground, but admittedly I've only been doing MLP themed conventions since 2022, so that Galacon being the very first international one I've ever attended, so big step up for me. And I was going to say it was the first community guest appearance I was granted, but that wouldn't be true. I had one here in the UK at Festival of Friendship this year as well. So first major international community guest appearance is probably the easiest way to put it. And a marvellous time as well. Absolutely loved it. Loved every minute of it.
But it was, as you say, it was very exhausting for you as your first, out of UK convention. It was really very draining by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it was I mean, I mentioned it on the sort of the elephant on the room stream that you're kind of referring to. I am humongously scared, if not, well, I don't even know if there's a word to describe. I have a completely irrational fear of flying, very much like oh boy. I've traveled a lot. I've gone pretty much all over the world as a kid. So it's not like I have never stepped on a plane before, but I adamantly refused to step on one for a good 10 years. And going to Galacon was the very first time I stepped on one in that 10 years. So not only on one, but because of how I set up the flight plan, stepped on 4 different ones. So 4 takeoffs, 4 landings. For someone who is terrified of just planes in general, I really did throw myself into the deep end on that one. All for Galacon's sake again. And again, absolutely worth it. Not the flying. I absolutely hated every minute of it. Like if
Okay, yeah.
if you'd seen me, it would have been I wouldn't have sounded as this calm, shall we say, while sitting in the airplane seat. I was perpetually buckled in, had noise cancelling headphones, everything, just doing all I could to try and forget that I was like 30,000 feet in the sky, and just counting down the minutes until we got back on the bloody ground. So, yeah.
Yeah. Totally understand that. For me, taking off is the worst bit, I think, for flying for me. I'm not great at flying either. It's just, and again, like for me, that's the first time I've been abroad on my own in at all really. I usually go with family members and things, but that was the first ever flight I took abroad on my own, and like the taking off is just always horrible, and the turbulence is awful as well. I don't like turbulence either, but it's just like, it's sort of like, I guess, a sensation that like when it happens, you're sort of falling backwards, I suppose. I hate that. I totally understand that. Well, a lot of people don't like flying. I don't like flying either, but yes. So but yeah, as an aside, before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of things, like you mentioned very briefly at the beginning of the presentation, or as you say, something happened with your luggage, that Lufthansa nearly lost your luggage or something. What happened there?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, it's of my luck that not stepping on the plane for 10 years, and the very first time I do, I do a connecting flight, and of course in that connecting flight, luggage goes walkie. So the long and short of it, when we got to Frankfurt, the connecting hub, everything was fine. You know, I had the Lufthansa app and I was tracking everything. Luggage had arrived. I get on the plane, and obviously we lose connection to the internet terminal. So I was just like, okay, well, things should be fine. I land in Stuttgart, and as soon as I land and start getting internet connection again, I get an email saying, "We're sorry, we couldn't load your luggage onto the aircraft."
Oh, you're joking.
I'm not.
Oh, shit.
And the worst part is at Galacon, I was also stall holding. So everything in that had needed to be checked in was in the bags that got lost, alongside my partner's entire trip worth of clothing and essentials. So we land.
Oh, bloody hell.
We see what's going on. I try to get information from the local desk, and obviously they don't know anything because they're just a luggage collection point. They're not actually related to the airline. So fill in the form. But I then get another notification saying that they've loaded it onto the next plane, which will land 4 hours from when we landed. Now, I had thought that maybe I'd be able to go out of the terminal to just get some fresh air, get some food, get whatever. But I wasn't entirely sure I could do that, and I'm glad I wasn't sure. So I sent my partner out through customs and everything, and I stayed on the airplane side, on the baggage collection side, to make sure that we could get stuff. So she goes out, and then she's told, no, you can't re-enter. So I had to sit on baggage reclaim for like 4 hours waiting for this blasted bag to appear, and thankfully they both did. But it was truly, I was so fuming. I was absolutely just, I was not a happy bunny. If I'd gone to the convention at that point, like if I had to like head straight into the convention, I would have been the most miserable sod on the planet. But thankfully, I was on the Friday.
Jesus.
And I was able to just relax and calm down and not have to worry so much. But it was a massive shame. I missed out on the sort of event dinner that they host at the convention hall for community guests.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it was a massive shame, and I felt really guilty about it too, because I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to coming to meet everyone in advance, and it caused a nightmare on the day on Saturday because I had to then rush in early, try and find Deus, the chairman, get my community guest badge sorted because the front desk doesn't have any, and then I had to get acquainted with the venue quickly, and just suffice to say, Lufthansa, I was told very quickly by Deus and the rest of the Galacon staff that they aren't called Lufthansa. That's actually a lie. They're called Lolhanza. That makes sense now. Okay. So yeah, they technically lie about who they are. They're truly called Lolhanza, and I'm not flying with them again. That's for sure.
Crikey O'Reilly. I only bring this up not to make you miserable, of course, but and for a bit of context. But as I say, I also had issues with Lufthansa, but not on the flight to Germany, but on the flight back to Birmingham. I was flying back. I had a similar issue actually. I was flying back on the Wednesday afternoon, I think it was like 3:30 or something like that. But actually, I got onto the flight about 3:30. It was a little bit over, running behind schedule, but that wasn't too bad, in about 20 minutes or something. Mm-hmm. But then on the tannoy, the captain said, "Oh, by the way, due to a technical issue, inverted commas, they were unable to load any of the luggage onto the flight." So, for God's sake. So it was literally... So they gave us an option, basically. You can either fly over back to Birmingham without your luggage, or you've got the option to depart the plane and then fly with your luggage on the next flight, which was the following morning. Okay, so fair enough. That's not too bad. So I got off the plane, as I did a few with other people, got to the check-in desk and all that stuff, and got all sorted out and stuff like that. But... for me, it was weird. It was actually okay. I got the flight rebooked and everything. But what I was pissed off about was a few other people behind me in exactly the same situation. They decided to go off the plane because they didn't want to fly without their luggage. There was like a poor couple with like a young baby, and they had like a pram, and like they couldn't find the pram and everything. So. And the people behind me, they, for what I gather, a lot of them got charged a rebooking fee to get on the next flight. So, hang on, how is that fair? You gave them the option, and me the option, to get off the flight to take the next flight with the luggage. So you gave us the option, and they didn't charge me, thankfully, but. A lot of people behind me, for whatever reason, they got charged. Why are they getting charged? And I have no idea what the fuck was going on with that, but it was just very, very disappointing. I thought the incoming flight into Germany was absolutely fine, no issues, no problems there. But then it all fell apart on the departing flight back to Birmingham. It's just like, what the fuck was going on? So I did send an official complaint to Lufthansa Customer Services. I don't know whether they're going to do anything about it, but like I was saying, that's out of order. What you did there was basically a bait and switch. Mm-hmm. That was my argument. Like, you told people you can get off the flight, and so you can rebook onto the next one, and then why did they get charged? What the fuck's going on? I still don't know the ins and outs of it. I don't know whether there's a technical issue with the computer system or but that's not the point. I'm saying you shouldn't give people the option to get off the flight and not tell them, oh, by the way, there might be a rebooking fee. That is absolutely bullshit.
Yeah,
but. That was the issue I had. So I had to on the night. Thankfully I was staying with my good friend Jay Dash. He lives in Germany, and he went to the convention with me. So basically I had to go back to his house, an hour or so on the train back to his house. Thankfully I managed to navigate the train system back from the airport. But yeah, that was a really stressful thing to do that on my own. But there you go.
Bloody hell! No, that does sound miserable, and
it's just like. Yes,
you're definitely making me feel better for publicly saying I'm never flying with them again, because that definitely
yeah, not great.
No,
let's just put it. Mine was literally just a single flight. You had even more trouble because you had connecting flights, but mine was just the one flight. But Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, I'm glad not to be thinking about them again. I'm sorry to hear that you also experienced it, but it did sound, at least from what I was told as well, that some other people didn't get their luggage delivered on time with their merch.
I think the biggest issue I had was like they weren't clear with everybody. Like if you. I don't like, you know, like flights and stuff get delayed all the time and issues happen all the time with stuff like that. But it's just like, if you're not going to tell your customers, your patrons, like what's happening, they're going to get pissed off. You're not, instead of like, my argument was, why didn't you tell us at the gate? Instead, like, why did you like make us go through all that, get onto the plane, and why couldn't you tell us at the gate? That would have saved an awful lot of time. And like, okay, there's an issue with the plane, whatever. Like, we do apologise. That makes sense. Go to the customer service desk, which we did, and all that. But like, it was just completely dropped the ball, and like, I'm not impressed.
No.
Put it that way.
No.
But yeah, so that's my tale of woe for Galacon. But that was the only hitch I had with the whole trip, really. But Lolhanza it is, I suppose.
Quite.
But yes. So that was a bit of a doozy. But anyway, enough rambling about Lolhanza and their misgivings. Let's talk. Yes, so this wasn't planned, listeners and viewers, where depending on where you're watching or listening to this. This wasn't planned. Well, the podcast was planned, obviously, but the content to which we're going to discuss in the podcast is a bit unprecedented, because basically I approached Mr. G literally just after Galacon ended, about a week after or something like, would you like to come on the podcast? He said, yes, that's great, awesome. So we got all that set in stone for the end of this month, which is now, and then literally 6 days, like about less than a couple of weeks ago, made the announcement, basically, an emergency announcement on Twitter. So I thought, oh God, something's happened, of course. And then, of course, like on the Saturday just gone last week, you basically announced that the EOJ project is now going on hiatus until 2025. So, which is a bit of a... I didn't expect that to happen, but of course, and I was thinking maybe, oh dear, like... I really do appreciate you coming on the show and like torturing yourself once again. Like, happy to explain the ins and outs of it once again. So literally 6 days ago, it was a case of like, do you still want to do the podcast? And you gladly accepted. And so I thought, yes. So we will be talking about the hiatus a little bit more detail. Well, Mr. G would be taking the reins for probably the next half an hour or so, and so it would be an opportunity to maybe clarify a few things here and there, and I will give some of my insights here and there, what have you. But so it sounds like, of course, you announced the hiatus on Saturday during the live stream. Well, to me, it sounded like this hiatus has been on the cards for quite some time. Would you say that's a accurate assessment on that?
Yeah, it's... How do I put this?
Take your time, as I say. I don't want to like, put you... You can be as brief or as succinct as you like, or as detailed as you like. I'm not going to like interrogate the poor kid, interrogate you for the next half an hour, because that was a stressful thing to do. But please carry on.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I appreciate it, and I think for a lot of people, if they're listening and they're regular viewers of EOJ, they'll want that answer anyway. So it's no skin off my nose. I mean, it's here now. We're in the hiatus now, so there's not really anything too disastrous, too world shattering that I can say that will really just destroy people's morale any further, or my own. But to kind of answer the question, it has and it hasn't. So back in, well, let's think. So back when we started planning for Case 3, which would have been about August last year, just before August actually, we were making really good progress. Things were looking up, and we were making good time. But in August of 2023, we ended up parting ways with the previous owner due to material that which we constituted as unacceptable. And I'm not going to go into that particular event because it's a bit grim for a start, but there'll be some elements I'll probably touch on later. But that significantly set us back, as probably is obvious. Now, thankfully, most of the pipeline and planning had already been put in play, and at the time I was already creative director, so there wasn't too much of a change in direction that needed to happen. It was just a big shift in team dynamic. And over the course of those couple of months, we were sort of reevaluating what we wanted to do, how far we wanted to push stuff, and we managed to get pretty far with all the planning and preparation. And during that time, as we were making the credits, so there was a lot of activity happening, for like since last year, is what I'm trying to kind of verbalize. Is we've been going non-stop with a load of pitfalls and really nasty stuff happening since last year. Well, even before August of last year, July of last year, because obviously we'd still not completed. We'd just been completing episode 9 of Case 2. So there was like a whole. We didn't really get much of a down period, and when we get into the start of Case 3, so January of this year, we try to improve what we call the rendering pipeline, which is basically because we use Adobe Animate, which is an animation software, not a editing software, to make the series, because we use puppet rigs from the Adobe Animate suite and all that good stuff. You have to take it through another layer. You have to go through another process, which usually involves just taking the FLA file from Adobe Animate, putting it in through After Effects to make sure that the sort of layering of both the background, the characters, lighting, all that stuff is accurate, fix up any sort of bugs that have come across, because lo and behold, you can create a file and you can make sure it's clean during the editing, but as soon as you get into the final stage of rendering, there's probably 100 bugs that have somehow managed to transfer from from the same file from one user to the next. So you've got to do all of that, and then once you've done that, once you've made sure that it's clean, you actually put it into the rendering machine. So you put it into Premiere Pro, you actually render it with mastered audio, so audio that's been treated, made to sound better, and only then do you actually get an end state product. You get a finalized product, and even then there can still be problems, because if for whatever reason during the rendering the particular file, the FLA that you've just spent all that time trying to make sure it doesn't have a problem, has a problem, well, it's going to be in the final product. So to make a very complicated and technically sounding sort of pipeline very clear, Adobe sucks, and we just have to live with it. And we've done that pretty much month in, month out for all of this year. And there was probably 3 times where I'd say we would have got into the situation we are in now, where we would have needed to have taken a long hiatus. And each time we avoided it because I used Bonds of Justice as a bit of a stopgap. So previously, before we got started, I'd hoped to use Bonds of Justice as a supplementary piece of content maybe once every 3 months. So first Saturday of the month, I'd release maybe a Bonds of Justice episode to go alongside the main series. A bit of extra content. It wouldn't replace the main series, but it would, act as a nice little add-on. But when we started going through this pipeline process, it became apparent we needed that extra time in order to A, make the episodes, and B, have enough time to render them. So quite early on, I just started putting Bonds of Justice episodes in the release schedule, roughly around times where I think the respective Bonds of Justice would have the most impact, just to give us that extra month or two just to be able to render something. And there's been 2 Bonds of Justice. There was plans to have another Bonds of Justice in a couple of months for the exact same purpose, but when we got to about July of this year, before that, sorry, there's another part of the story. One of the main people who renders, my assistant director, Soundman, he got a new job, which was awesome. He'd previously not been working. He'd previously been struggling to find work, but he got he got a part-time job, and then he went into full-time afterwards. So he was able to start earning a proper living wage and improve his lifestyle and all that good stuff. But obviously, like myself, if you go into a full-time career, your time just gets absolutely eaten up. When you take into account all the problems I've just mentioned with the pipeline process, and the only other person available has also just gone through employment difficulties, so needs to focus on that, you can start to see that there's a massive bottleneck, and it's not just something that we can bring someone on to fix, because well, for lack of a better term, the stuff that is made through EOJ isn't something you can just find. It's not a skill set you can just pick up anywhere. It's a little bit egotistical to say, but EOJ is quite literally one of a kind when it comes to pony content creation, because we have our own way of making the episodes. There is no nobody could copy it effectively. It is EOJ specific. Now, granted, we use the same software as a lot of people, Adobe Animate, as I previously mentioned, but the amount of coding scripts that have been designed just to make the damn thing function is at this point a whole separate piece of software. And we do jokingly refer to it as Better Animate for that reason. So yeah, lots of time needed to be spent to render an episode. The person or people who could do that being put into a situation where they can't. And so you're basically told, okay, we're going to have to pull, the plug. Pull the plug. We're going to have to stop. As
turn the power supply off.
Yeah, exactly. It's a better way of putting it. So we stop. We were going to stop, and the plan initially was to get past the most recent episode that I teased at Galacon 3.6, and then sometime after 3.6 make the announcement. But during the final rendering phase, my assistant director Soundman let me know that it just wasn't going to happen. That if we wanted to release this month, it wasn't going to happen because, again, life being life, he had just also started moving into a new place, somewhere that he'd been dreaming of moving into for so long. So he obviously needed to focus on that. There's no question about that. And he did try his best to put time in to get it done, but there was no way. There was absolutely no way it was going to happen.
Yeah, not feasible, is it really, with all that going on? Yeah, absolutely.
So we get to, this is a week before I make the announcement, and a week and a half or so, and I basically spend half that week just thinking of what I want to do, and and then the sort of Monday before the announcement on the Saturday, I just start posting that stuff, that there's a big thing that needs to be said. Well, sorry, I let the members of the YouTube channel and the Patreon members know that we're going into a hiatus, and then on Wednesday I announced that there's an emergency live stream for when the episode was to release, and as they say, the rest is history.
It sounds like a lot of stuff piled up in all sorts of aspects of production which led to you having to making the very difficult decision to actually cease production and go into hiatus into 2025. In terms, Adobe sucks. Yeah, I think that's a given. I absolutely can't stand Adobe. They make you pay for software that doesn't work half the time. And that's just talking about stuff like Photoshop and things, but I'm not really familiar with a lot of their other Adobe suite, but they're getting sued. The FTC is suing them for, the shady cancellation practices, but that's another ballpark in of itself. But yes, I will stress that you're looking at you, Adobe, with stern eyes. Try and fix your software before charging people extortionate rates to use it. But anyway, that's just one gripe I have. But so in terms of Adobe, you use Adobe to render out the seams, it sounds like. What kind of issues are we talking? Does the software crash a lot? Is that the main?
Well, yeah. I suppose anything can happen. So off the top of my head, the biggest issue that we've had in the past is, as you say, the software crashing out of nowhere.
Great.
And that is awful, because sometimes when you're working, you're just going to get into the groove of working, and you may or may not hit the save button. So
that sucks.
Yeah, and funnily enough, there isn't really actually an autosave feature that is capable of functioning within Adobe, or at least from what at least the bare. And I need to stress, I'm not a technical guy when it comes to the Adobe product.
So yeah, you know better than I do.
Oh well, that's not that much. I just kind of parrot what I'm told. I'm a very good puppet in that regard. Salman is the tech genius in that sphere. But my self-deprecation aside, When it comes to problems, the software crashing and not saving the file with the work on it has been a massive bugbear for a long period. Up until, however, we, as I said before, basically built in the feature to stop that being the problem. There is an autosave feature which has auto recovery, and you can just basically avoid massive information loss and time loss. So yeah, we built around that. We've had I can only describe it as ghost in the machines behavior. There are like a couple of gags in the team. One scene from like case 2, I can't remember. I think it must have been either like episode 4, scene 4. I'm not entirely sure. But basically, there's a gag which we refer to as scene 404.
Very good. Very good.
It's I don't know the full story of it myself, but from what I do know and from what I was told, the whole scene just would not function. Like, none of the rigs would just operate as they should have done. The whole thing was cursed. I think it broke every time someone tried to open it. It was, they had started working on it and then it just stopped working. And again, I'd need to go back and I'd have someone who was actually there at the time, because when it happened, I was just an audio engineer, and a very loose one at that. So I didn't get the full ins and outs of all the fun that was happening on the Adobe side. But we've had full scenes break on us. Other major things. Just the joy of working with a piece of software that doesn't like itself. That's usually the biggest problem. We've had issues with file sizes just ballooning. Oh, actually, no, there's a very funny one that happened not too long ago, quite a recent one. There seemed to be some weird replicator glitch of some capacity. So whenever someone opened up a file containing a folder of assets, because there's like a library in Adobe Animate, and it contains all the information for rigs and background scenes, etc. When they implemented that folder and then closed the program and then reopened, for some reason that file would just copy itself in the file, and
oh joy!
It would, yeah. So it was it was basically a time bomb, because at some point it was going to copy itself to the point where it would
and the
be
file
too
size
large.
was ballooning and oh no.
Yeah. Thankfully, we figured out what the problem was and we prevented it. But like every scene that we had been working on had effectively got that massive, there was a possibility that everything we were working on could do the same thing. It could just balloon into something that was could quite literally brick itself. I'm sure there are more stories that people who've actually done the editing can, tell that I can't. But that's just some of the stuff. And we're talking, I say it quite nonchalantly because I don't deal with it. That's the perks of, I guess, being a director, is you don't have to deal with the hell, well, in that sphere anyway. But yeah, you've got to consider that this is a big operation. So when you have that happening, and when people have to work around their normal lives, one of those things is problematic in itself. But we've dealt with every single one of those things. So yeah, we've certainly had our World War I trench warfare kind of situation with Adobe very, very often, and I pray, and I'm very grateful for everybody who bothers to even try and fight that infernal demon. Honestly,
That's an ongoing. So yeah, you've with the issues with Adobe, as I said, you've already explained it a little bit more in detail. Like because of how ingrained all the coding and all the mechanics behind everything, it's not a case of you can't use something else, because everything's bespoke to that system, that piece of software. It's not a case of screw Adobe, we'll use something else. So because there's that many moving parts, you can't. A lot of people I did see in the live stream, why can't you just use something else? It's not that straightforward. It's not a case. If you build something like with game engines and things like that, if you spend years and years learning how to use a particular game engine, I'm not a game developer myself, but I'm aware of some of the pitfalls of such. It's not a case of let's just switch to Unreal Engine, let's just use Unity instead. It's not a.
Yep.
You can't switch over to. Logistically, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do that once you've committed to a particular piece of software. So yes, so that's one of I wish it was a case of pressing a button and switching over. It's not. It really is not. Like with from my experience, like of course I'm an artist, of course. I'm not a very good one, but in terms of, like, for example, a lot of people still in the MLP community, in the 3D space anyway, still use SFM. Now, Blender is the one that you should go for, but again, it's jumping from Source Filmmaker into Blender is not a 5-minute thing. You've got to convert all the assets into a new format, and you've got to learn the new workflow, and you've got to. Again, it's also a case sometimes like you might need to upgrade your machine because Blender's more demanding. Those are just a few of the issues. So it's not a case of like clicking your fingers and job done. You're on the new software, or that issue's fixed. So, but yes, so that logistically, there's a lot of work that goes into. Not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very difficult, or if not impossible, in a lot of cases to. Do that. So I'm aware from like that sort of perspective. Yeah, it's not a 5-minute switch. But yeah, so what else have I got? I'm just looking through my notes here. Adobe, piece of shit, covered that. But I think another big one I want to cover, I think you've covered most of the main ones, of course. We'll cover some of the other more nitty-gritty as well. But quite a few people were still perhaps a bit confused as to specifically why you talked quite a bit about why you didn't like Case 2, and I think a lot of people are still confused as to why you, as the project lead, like what aren't too keen of it. So it's. I think it's fair to say it wasn't to do with like the content. I think it's probably more to do with like the productions issues itself. Would you say that's a fair assessment regarding Case 2?
I think I'll tackle the thing that is accurate, the most simple to give my opinion on. So yes, in terms of like production, definitely 125 billion% did production woes jade a lot of people's perspective on the case. Obviously, the time between episode releases was a major waste of time for a lot of people. You know, there was a lot of good fun, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we spent all that time just kind of sitting there going, so what? Now what? You know, the end of the Finding Nemo movie kind of situation. We were moving, but things were very disorganized. Things weren't very well led. We had a change in management structure, which is where I first became PR team lead / manager. We have a bit of a terminology issue, or did have a terminology issue for a long time. We didn't really get the sort of whole division of command structure very right to start with, because it was the original creator, and then it kind of went to two managers who were both writers, one called Destro, the other who was well known for writing the Twilight and Athena balcony scene, and then another one, Serenity, who at the time had the predominant lead on road mapping and writing. So it was very writer centric, very writer focus, and we did not have anybody from any of the other teams or anybody else really represented within that leadership structure. And this led to a bit of a problem when, during Case 2, specifically for 2.3, said Serenity wrote a whole load of information for the episode out of nowhere, pretty much on the last day before the script was supposed to be finalized, about 40 pages worth, and just absolutely threw everybody for a loop. It infuriated several people in the writing team. Jarvi, who's the current team leader, as an example. It was just not a very good, structure. So we had some talks, we consulted, and then we kind of reworked the structure to include people from animation, editing, artists, audio engineers, and then I kind of snuck in as the PR team lead because I really wanted to try and improve the public image of the team. And that was cool. And we got a better place. We had more people eyes on the situation. And that improved that element. But we still didn't have a very good sort of progress track, and we didn't really have a clear understanding of when things needed to be done by when in order to enable something else to be done. There wasn't project management tracking, for lack of a better term. We didn't have a schedule to keep because no one thought that a schedule would be useful to have. And admittedly, and to give ourselves a little bit more of a break, I suppose, or to not be too harsh on ourselves, a lot of us did see this as, very amateurish, very much kind of just like, well, we're just throwing in the spare hours we have during the day, because, well, it's most of us were like 18 teens, young teens in some cases. It's not really major. But when we started to properly put things in place and start implementing organization structure, hierarchy, it just, those types of things didn't come easily because we never had them before. People were generally receptive to it. Some people weren't, and those people no longer are here because they chose to not engage with that, and that's perfectly fine. Ultimately, it's a volunteer project. You're kind of here only because you want to be here. So we do that, and then we take a bit of time between 2.3 and 2.4, get that new structure in play, and then things start improving. But we then have issues with our scope. So we made quite a fair amount of like 2D animated sort of end credit scenes, animations type of stuff. It was fine. It was mostly just to try and kind of show the coolness of like, oh, look at us, we can do 2D animation and all this fancy schlick. But every time we tried to do that, it would delay the episodes because that stuff is not bloody easy to do, and we were, as a collective, very stupid for thinking that it was. But again, we didn't really consider the needs of everything. We weren't very good at looking at the bigger picture. And eventually things started changing around again. And in, I think it was about like September of 2022, I petitioned to become assistant director to assist with that kind of project management, since it was a career I was walking into at the time. And then we did started to adapt as a result. Now, ironically enough, me doing that is also when we also took a massive break between 2.8 and 2.9. But again, it was just to do what we called Operation Revamp. So you've got issues with the story being messed around with initially. You've got people kind of not really organized in a space to enable us to deliver a product. And then you've got a sort of weakened sense of hierarchical understanding and not very stringent adherence to basic deadlines in order to, move to keep momentum. So we had to basically build all of that from the ground up, which is where Operation Revamp between 2022 and 2023 kind of came into the picture. A lot of just doing the basics from the ground up. So yeah, that's all happening in the background of Case 2, as well as interpersonal conflict. I mentioned before that the Serenity individual, he ended up being removed due to poor behavior, which then impacted the way in which we addressed the story going forward. Because fun fact, whilst he was in charge of the road mapping, and the original creator was in charge of the general story direction, there wasn't actually any planning put in place for Case 3, or 4, or 5 for that matter. There was general ideas like, this sort of thing and this type of thing, but yeah, nothing that you could actually work from. We had what we call a story Bible, but it was not a Bible. In fact, what kind of led to the departure of said Serenity was a break-in of a weird rule, which, me saying it now will probably be very weird for most people. The only people who knew the story were the writers and the original creator, which, in some ways it makes sense, but when we put into context that there were 5 other managers who were helping to make sure the project worked, and the fact that there was this what could only be described as gatedness towards the story was not very conducive either. So we've got this wonderful kind of mess of just production stuff happening. No clear idea where we're taking the case with. It just, like, this is a whole thing in itself, and I'll probably go into more detail, but you can probably appreciate just from that sort of a brief, and I mean that's a brief because there is so much more I could dive into there, look into kind of where we were at as a production team, if we really could. That's a very generous way of looking at it as well, because again, we were more like a collective group of people who just had a crazy idea and were kind of winging it. So that's production. So that's the easy side, right? That's the easy side.
That's the easy bit. Okay.
Yeah. Story. So, case 2 story. This is one of those weird situations. Like, I went onto the TV tropes after the live stream to see whether or not anything I'd said actually stuck. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad that my mention of things like, all the depression I've suffered from the series it wasn't there. But
yeah, we'll cover that. I'll definitely go over that with you in a bit. Yes, please continue. But yeah, that's a crucial bit. That's a crucial bit.
Yeah. But in some ways, I'm glad that wasn't kind of just like the main takeaway. But what was a takeaway was the comments I made offhand to a question about case 2. Which is what we're on this point now about the fact that as creators we didn't like case 2, and yet there's a general fan acceptance that case 2 was a masterpiece. I would be 100% upfront and say no, it was not a masterpiece. But I am very, very happy and very grateful to everyone who will fight that fight, because bloody hell, you sure as hell won't see most of us fighting it. We spent so much time suffering in all those things I just mentioned about the production. Like, if we didn't at least have some desire to make this thing work, we wouldn't be doing that. But from a story narrative perspective, my biggest gripes ultimately came down to 3 things. 1, I don't know what the whole point of it was, truthfully. Now, in most cases in Ace Attorney, they don't need to have a point usually. There are cases that quite literally don't do anything. And the most famous kind of phrase that's thrown around is known as case 3 syndrome for that particular reason. But for a series that is not about a game that can just be played in a oneer and is a long-term commitment, having a case that kind of didn't feel like it was really going anywhere really just doesn't sit right with me. And annoyingly, and I can't say too much because there were some things we did recover from the old ideas that I don't want to spoil, there wasn't really that much that the case introduced to warrant its existence in this previous greater narrative. So you have a whole situation that happens, and the end result is just a mayor and her son crying, which is not a great payoff from my perspective, especially for everything that went down. 2, the way in which the case was written felt very unfair for a viewer. So when I was first talking about like how is this going to end to one of the writers, to Jarvi, one of the writers, and to someone else, I can't remember who it was, they were like, well, who do you think it is? And I'm like, oh, it's this person. It's like, no, think about it more. And I was like, I don't know. And then they say it was, well, it's like a year now, so it doesn't really matter if I spoil it. It's Turning Page. And I kind of sit there and go, why? It's like, how? It's like, hold on. Where are the clues? Where are the lead up? Where is this thing? And it's like, well, he's willing to sacrifice himself for his for Scootaloo. It's like, no, you can't use that as an argument, because he has been portrayed to the audience up until this point as a noble, valiant, and self-sacrificing individual. So to say that this is a piece of evidence that he was the killer, when you've basically presented him as that kind of mentality in general, it's too obfuscating. Like, you can't claim clever points of like misdirection because you're presenting two conflicting narratives. Likewise, the whole sort of he's not guilty. Well, considering this is the second case, 9 times out of 10, when someone is declared not guilty, they're not fucking guilty. So you get that whole shebang of just kind of like, okay, well, we sorted with this. Now we've got the Sweetie Belle, which kind of leans into my third point. There were 5 people accused. Like, we've had Scootaloo, you've had Turning Page, you've had Sweetie Belle, you had Sugar Stamp, and you kind of had Fair Devotion as well. Like, okay. It's fine to have a case where you just go absolutely balls to the walls with, like, there is so many things happening. But to put it in perspective, we've managed to achieve in about 5 hours of content what Case 2 could do in about 10. And the amount of story widening, and it's kind of a fourth minor point. Well, no, because I've already mentioned it in the first point. The amount of stuff Case 3 has managed to kind of like show, just generally, just related to the case, but also to the wider mystery we're trying to tell, in 5 hours is more than what I think the whole of Case 2 did. The only exception to that is the introduction of the fact that there's a thing called the High Council. That's like the only thing I will say that Case 2 did extremely badly, but was a positive in its favor. It's not like I don't think Case 2 didn't have any end value. I mean, when I say that, I kind of think for a minute about how many hours I've had to spend thinking about how to tie it into the actual greater narrative we've got going on right now. And blimey, is that a nightmare in itself? But we figured something out. And whilst writing Case 3, funnily enough, we've also figured out ways to kind of keep it going. And the biggest one being Luna's characterization. But it's, to me, I think the best way to sum up Case 2 is, it all rests on one principle, and that is it has a very sad ending where you feel something towards the characters. There's an emotional sense of, wow, these people suffered. And that's great. That in itself is wonderful, but that's not something that Ace Attorney does alone. Like, Ace Attorney cases, in my opinion anyway, as someone who has never played the games to completion but has seen every single one of them and loves the series, is they are detailed, gripping dramas with a sense of who's done it, figuring it out, with those character elements laid into them. And I feel if people spent more time kind of like taking a step back and going, what do you actually remember from Case 2? And it'll be kind of maybe the things that are kind of more character driven, like, as I say, the ending of the case, or the sort of exclamations by certain characters, like Turning Page's antics, or the whole Sweetie Belle blackmail thing. Like, if you remember those things, and that's what makes you think that case is great, cool, awesome. But like, Case 3 is doing that, and then some in spades, more so. Equity, for a good example. There is more characterization of Equity. Up until Case 3, there was only the most amount of characterization we got for her was in Bonds of Justice, which I need to remind people we specifically tried to avoid doing too many narrative-heavy things with, because it's the side series. To take a really long-winded rant and try and contain it into a small box, because I am aware that I will go off on this until the cows come home.
Rant away, by all means. I'm here all day. Carry on. if you want, the state and the microphone is yours, as I say.
Oh, well, I mean, it better well be, because I spent a lot of money on it. No, I'll kind of wrap this segment up so you can, put your point in as well to kind of guide me towards whatever you want me to focus on, or give a bit more detail in a sec. But to wrap everything I'm saying up for this first part, there is so many elements of Case 2 that you can enjoy. Don't get me wrong, there are elements to enjoy, and it's not about not enjoying it. It's about really critically thinking, what have you gotten from this that you can actually carry forward? What have you gained from it? It's a great, personally, the whole of Case 2 rested on that end scene with Fair Devotion and Turning Page. I said this to people before we released it. I said, this is either going to go horribly wrong, or people are just going to care about the fact that ponies are crying. And I was right in some ways, because people really lost their shit over the fact that that sad scene. And I'm glad, because we went all in on that, especially with the art that was suddenly produced down there. I like the still of Turning Page, Fair Devotion crying together with the ribbon, and then Royal Order kind of coming in and giving sort of like a gentle hug as a ghost. That just came out of nowhere from one of our artists, Corey. There was just some inspiration, shall we say. We really tried to make that painful. But as I say, that kind of in itself is more evidence of why I just don't have much respect for Case 2, because it's all leading up to this really big kind of blow up of emotion, this, as I sometimes refer to it, cry porn.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing to have that, but it's not something that you will honestly go away and go, that's what Turnabout Storm did. And that's the big thing for me, is, Turnabout Storm is great. It's not amazing. It's great. I love it. And I haven't watched it in a long time. I should probably rewatch it. When for what it did at the time of what was achieved with the ideas, with the energy, it's great. It's awesome. That's what's amazing about it. And it has a really, really nice, tight story. It's got all of this working together. It's just I think the best way to put it is, it's great because everything it does is good. The sum of its parts come together nicely. You wouldn't call that like show-stopping in Ace Attorney, right? You wouldn't say this is better than Trials and Tribulations. Like, this doesn't tip, this isn't the tip of creativity, but it's so great because of how good it did everything it needed to. But that, to me, is not what Case 2 does. It doesn't do that sort of wonderful kind of wrapping things together. It overcomplicates so many aspects. That 40 pages I mentioned from Serenity is about accusing Sakura, which goes absolutely nowhere in the rest of the case. It's just there in episode 3 for the sake of it. It's that type of thing that really makes me go critically, I'm not proud of that case. I don't want that to be our defining moment, and I'm not going to let that be our defining moment.
I think, from my perspective anyway, again, like, a lot of people are going to have different opinions on whether, I like Case 2 better, or I like Case 3 better. Again, I don't think it's fair to compare 2 and 3, simply because, 3 isn't finished yet, but it's kind of the situation where, like, I guess, like, the Ralph what's his name, Ralph Bakshi, Lord of the Rings, his trilogy only he's only covered the first 2 films, so I don't think it's fair to compare something that's really incomplete compared to, like, something that is complete. That's one issue I have. But with Case 2, it does have issues, but again, I think, from my personal perspective, I think you've been a bit hard on yourself, and I think you have your opinions, of course, because it was an absolute nightmare to put together. That's a lot of the crux of why you don't like it, and like you feel the payoff wasn't very good. Again, people are going to get different things out of it. For me, I wasn't really focused on the killer myself. I think personally, I was more focused on the interplay between Luna and Athena. I was more concerned about how's Athena going to get through this nightmare of a case, and from that perspective, for me, what I was focusing on, I thought it was really good. I got the impression where, like, let's call it Team Phoenix, I suppose, like, they're on the ropes, and, like, this is a really, really difficult case, and Athena's got a lot on her plate to deal with. And the twists and turns are like, it went for on and on and on, as real cases do in real life. So I don't think I felt ever cheated or anyway, or felt it was maybe went on for a bit too long in that sort of perspective, because I got what I was looking for out of it. It was more interested in what Luna's doing, because, like, she's controlling the narrative, and, like, she's basically inadvertent, well, without being too direct about, without giving the game away, she's at least initially she's trying to guide Athena, but then, like, Athena starts doing more erratic things, mainly because of her inexperience, and partly because of, like, she's not really aware of what Luna is capable of, or what her motivations are. So she's looking at Luna thinking, like, what is she playing at? And, like, she figures out pretty quickly, like, Luna's trying to guide things, but That's the bit I was interested in most of all. I wasn't really concerned about who killed who or who the killer was or what happened. I was interested in those two characters, especially near the end, like where like Athena basically pulls out of nowhere, like, okay, Sweetie Belle, I'm not going to represent you anymore. That bit that sold it for me. I didn't really care about everything else. I can see why some people might not like Case 2 in the sense that maybe it does drag on a bit and like it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of content there. But again, if you're the kind of person who likes to binge stuff, which I do, I was like happy as a clam with like popcorn, nom 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 nom, keep going. But I can see from your perspective as well, like you didn't maybe because of how the issues with production and how a lot of moving parts were moving a bit too quickly in terms of like how the writing was put together, like last minute with like loads of content thrown in at the last minute. I can see why from your perspective it was an absolute nightmare. I can from that bit of context there. That's my personal perspective, but I've only watched a little bit of Case 3. I'm really enjoying the multiple case experimenting with multiple cases at the same time in tandem. Where was I? The crucial thing I want to focus on was the emotional toll that's taken on you in certain ways, and of course you mentioned of you've recently very started because not entirely because of EOJ, but partially because of the turmoil with the project in various different ways. You've started a round of antidepressants, which is for me was a crucial thing to you, and a lot of members of the team are struggling with the mental health issues simply because of EOJ. And for me, that is a reason on its own, regardless of all the other stuff we discussed already, is a reason in itself to go on a hiatus and like reassess where the project is going and like to try and fix some of the issues ready for 2025. Because speaking as a person who suffered with mental health issues and physical issues as well, once something gets to that stage, it really is a case of you really have to stop what you're doing and reassess where you're going, because at the end of the day it's not worth breaking your back over for making of course you want to deliver the best series you possibly can. That goes for yourself and everybody on the team, of course, but it's not worth I've been in the situations where like I've probably like worked on nowhere near a bigger scope as EOJ, of course it can't be, like the stuff like the making art and things with Blender and stuff. I've been in situations where like I've spent literally months on trying to get a piece of art working, and I just thought I've fucking had enough. I've because of all the issues that I didn't foresee and what have you, without going into too much detail. I've been in situations like that myself where I just don't want. What's the point of it? Or like you start to wonder, like, what's the point of me putting myself through this hell, and yourself? Like, what's the point of putting yourself through this aggravation and unnecessary stress? I put it, what we'll add to just. Ironically, when we're talking about like pastel-coloured ponies and stuff, like that's what we're talking about here. The crux of it is, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Ironically, when you're making these kind of projects, and it's if it's the one piece of advice I will give you, I will say this: even if you feel it's a bit of kick in the ego, at the end of the day, you have to put yourself first. You have to put the team first as yourself first and the team first. And when it comes to that, it's literally not worth it. Just like it's a very, very. Sometimes, of course, yourself as the leader, maybe it's a case of sometimes you don't see the wood through the trees unless someone else actually points out, like, no, you really need to stop. Like here, you need to reassess everything, because you're going to kill you're literally like killing yourself slowly, effectively. That's the crux of what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think, and then of course, like you mentioned, a lot of the team were suffering from burnout as well. It's not easy. Talk about these quite big things, big developments in the project that you don't necessarily want to talk to, but you feel you have to for the good of the project and try and get it back on track. You very, very nearly threw in the towel because of all the stress. Like you very nearly said, "I've had enough. I can't do it anymore." It's literally it's too much of a burden.
Multiple times. Like at that point, I didn't labour on enough, I don't think.
Yes, so please do. That's why I brought that out to the forefront. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's appreciated. I mean, first of all, thanks very much for the kind words. I need to say that much. I don't see myself as a good leader sometimes. Even now, I'm a fine enough leader, but there is always this little part of me that is acutely aware of the failings. And there are a lot of mistakes I've made, and I've made a lot of people upset unnecessarily, which you ultimately you have to learn to do if you are going to become a better one. My stepdad always taught me that leadership is in itself an art form. Some people are naturally good at it, and some people have to be taught about it. But both need to do. You need to have both in order to be a great leader. And I like to believe I have naturally good leadership, but I have a lot of life experience left to learn. And that part of the whole throwing in the towel is in essence some of it. I mean, January, before we even got started on case 3, I was planning to throw in the towel for reasons related to the issue that happened in August. And before that, there was other moments. I mean, there's a bit of a joke that we've used in the team for a bit, which sort of countdown to midnight. There's a very silly joke of like a Donkey Kong sort of making silly noises as the clock kind of gets closer to midnight. It gets closer and then goes away closer and closer. It's just we've had a lot of laughs about it, but there was like at one point where I was drafting up a resignation letter or statement to the rest of the team leaders because I was that far gone. And I still have a little bit of one on standby as well, because it's not easy constantly putting yourself out there and then having to deal with some pretty gruesome stuff. I've made mention in a previous end of year kind of blog post in like 2023. I kind of mentioned like everything that happened last year with the old creator. Like people were actively harassing myself. There was some really like completely dumb death threats thrown my way unnecessarily. It did jade me a little bit. And most of the time those people are going to be just throwing them out there because they're idiots, and I'm not scared. I was a little bit scared when people were like, oh, which conventions are they going to? We need to make an example of them. But I mostly just took precautions for the team and myself in that regard, which ultimately just ended up just meaning be a bit more vigilant, thankfully, because ultimately I'm just a small fish in the big pond, and because it isn't like the brony community in inverted commas isn't as big as it used to be. There's not as much kind of like spreading around of stuff. So like whilst I know my face is out there, whilst I know my face is associated with this, it's not like the early 2010s where just like horse fame was just ridiculous. So I've got that saving grace. But that type of stuff just makes you kind of annoyed. It makes you just kind of not want to bother. And I've not been happy on EOJ for the past year or so. Like 365 days. So from like August of last year to August now, I've just not been very happy. It's gotten worse and it's gotten better in some points. The worst was January of this year. Slightly better points about 4 months ago. This is a bit of an up and down segment. Like Galacon was great, but generally I feel kind of blue because of the hiatus. It's just emotionally dysregulating. And the worst part is, as well, as you mentioned, is just going on new medication for this stuff. That is in itself has been I was always very hesitant about medication, mostly because of stories my mum told me about how it really messed with her, and I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not critically thinking more about what I should try and do. I've always been very kind of habitual focus with mental health, exercise, eating well, talking therapy's done a lot of that, but ever since I've started on the course, I've realized, it was a chemical imbalance. Just pure up needed that medication, and I feel not necessarily like on top of the world now, but I feel much more regulated, much more capable of focusing, and in some ways, EOJ going on hiatus, as you say, is probably an awesome thing to have happen alongside this kind of recovery period for myself. Like I'm coming up to like a month and a half now, I think, on my medication. So past the worst of it, bloody hell do those things absolutely murder you at the beginning. It's a fair piece of warning for anyone who may be considering, and I do recommend it, but holy moly does the nausea kill you sometimes. I'm someone who's had a few operations, had a few medical things, but I've never ever felt like I've never felt that kind of aware of like things happening, if that makes sense. Like in my brain, for example, I could just feel things getting more activated, or because ultimately antidepressants are SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. I read into this stuff madly whenever I get it, but they keep the amount of dopamine you have available, so I could sort of feel that happening. It's freaky, man. But EOJ wasn't making me better, and as you say, it takes people outside of you to kind of grab your attention, to focus and go, you may need to try something different. And after fighting both the mental health and the production goals, taking decisions that are better for myself has truly become part of my nature now. And this period of hiatus especially is just, it's a perfect example of that. Not getting lost in the goals that we had assigned. I mean, I wanted to get to 12 episodes this year. I wanted to release one piece of content every month, and I was keen to do that, and we were, initially anyway, very hopeful of that. But now that I've done it, now that I've kind of said the hiatus, now that I'm actually taking the pressure off of myself and kind of just playing video games rather than worrying about like production goals, I'm definitely feeling that sense of recovery that I've been lacking for so long. When you've been on the edge, like as I say, when it comes to wanting to throw in the towel, it is good to just finally feel like, okay, you can breathe. Like after this, I plan to try and start a game night with some of the team on Left 4 Dead 2. Just trying to reintroduce some of that element, because it used to be there was a lot more gaming, a lot more streaming, a lot more time wasting, shall we say, in case 2, again, because a lot of us have more time to do so, but hoping to try and institute some more of that fun element now, especially with the whole sort of September, putting everything down and just stopping, and boy, it's weird to think like for a whole month we're just going to actively do nothing and avoid doing whatever we can. Like people are still working behind, like the writers are still writing, and some of the animators are still animating, and some of the artists are still making art. I'm getting stuff done for UK PonyCon. It's not like we've gone completely quiet, but I'm not driving it as much anymore, and it's good, it's nice, it's a relax, it's a change of pace. So yeah, I felt miserable doing it. I felt miserable for a while, but I think this decision just to cut the loss, so to speak, and just pause here, it should hopefully do good for everybody going forward, myself included. Well, of course, until the next big thing happens. I mean, Christ, this place has gone through so many things that could have killed it. So many things that would kill anything else. Like this place isn't unkillable. It will live or die based on myself and Salman, my assistant director, both having the willpower to step up every morning. Because whilst I'm not the most technical person, I will spend hours just planning, preparing, organizing, ensuring things are staying together. And I know that if I go, that element gets lost. And whilst it can be picked up by other people, it's not a good thing to lose. There are foundations now that we've established that are important. And if Salman had to leave for whatever reason, I don't think that we would be able to continue altogether, just because of how much of the technical side he's got. So, it's mad for myself to think about how much is at stake, and yet not be so worried about it at the same time, just not be scared, really. Whereas before it has been a lot of fear and anxiety about like, oh, we're going to have to do this, always working. Bloody hell, the amount of deadline reworks I've done just to try and get to the 7 pieces of content we've had this year. Oh boy. Yeah, honestly, mental health, absolute bitch. But Loads of people are working on stuff. Loads of people are dealing with stuff in the team that we try our best to help with. I'm just so glad that we've got some financial assistance from the community at large, just to help stuff. Like I mentioned it like during the live stream. I've mentioned it at the panel that I host at Galacon. But like helping Joel, one of our previous audio engineers, out of literally being made homeless almost is just up there in terms of, yes, that's something I'm always going to be so happy about. Helping people with their equipment. Like, we're going to do what we can going forward. Do what I can, at least, to try and be happier and healthier. And I don't feel as inclined to give up now. Not especially since there's more talk within the team on how we're going to work better to ensure that it doesn't get to that point for me or for hopefully anybody else going forward. Now I know we're not going to succeed in that because we can't control for life, and this isn't our full-time career. As much as that would be amazing, but that's not going to happen. We're just going to do what we can, where we can, when we can.
I would like, in terms of like, of course, you talk about leadership and the issues involved with that. It's you might not believe it to be true. As I say, like I believe you're way too hard on yourself, and like in a lot of aspects, but it does make the mark of a good leader if a leader is able to acknowledge that like their own faults and not just palm off everything onto everybody else unnecessarily and put the blame on everybody else. Because I've worked in places where, like, not like in YouTube capacity and stuff, but I mean like in terms of like in a work capacity, where I've had like terrible managers and I've had terrible line leaders who did not give a shit what was happening beneath them. They always palmed off a lot of the stuff to the lower members of staff, and like they always get the blame. And I resent people like that. And you are not that, but not by any stretch of the imagination. Based on how frank you are, like talking about the project itself and like the challenges it's come across, and willing to maybe accept more than it's not blame. That's not the word I'm trying to think of. It's responsibility. That's what I was looking for. You're trying to putting way too much pressure on yourself, and on that front, I do believe that. But how you're willing to talk about like the issues of the project and like the challenges that you and the team has faced, and being frank about that is the mark of a good leader. And I will say that 100 times over, even if you don't believe me. That is what I believe. There's a lot of details that are still up in the air, of course, and of course I'm not going to speculate on what's going to happen, what you intend to do, or what the decisions you're intending to make or the team is going to make. I'm not going to do that, but I will say this: whatever decisions you decide to take, you have to put yourself first. That's paramount, and you have to put the team first by starting the hiatus and thinking where things should go and can go, and try to address the issues and not be so 12 episodes in a year, you crackers. You crackers. You are crackers. You are right, okay, so case, what was it case 3-2, I think, on its own, one chapter is 2.5 hours long. Future CitizenWolf here, apologies, I said the wrong case number there. I meant to say to Mr. G, case 2-3, not 3-2, hence the confusion of him in the next section. I kind of led him off on a incorrect tangent there. My apologies, that was my bad. It wouldn't make sense for me to say case 3-2 in that section, simply because 2-3 is 2.5 hours long, whereas case 3-2 is just over an hour long, so hence why he sounds a bit confused in the next section. I apologise for that. That was my bad on that one, folks. 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's a feature-length film on its own. And you're like, we're trying to do 12 of those.
Well, to be fair, obviously case 3 is per episode is about half the runtime of case 2, and that is half the reason why. Yeah,
I should think so.
That's why we were keen to try and push for that 12. One episode a month kind of goal, because it was a lot more digestible. Yeah, if it was 2 hours, I would agree with you on that one. It would be insane. And again, it's kind of a sort of circle back on the previous point. It's also why I am more confident in case 3 than I am in case 2, because again, we can deliver more in terms of contextual, story-driven character, whatever you may call it, in less time than what we could do with case 2. I mean, it was a big goal. It was a big ask. And as you say, I think more people would have been surprised by the fact that from beginning to end of case 2, so the first episode of case 2 released sometime in like May 2021. The time between the first episode and the last episode was 2 years of that case. 2 years to get through one case. And I think, like, if we don't count the production woes that occurred for case 1, it was another 2 years. Well, it was like a year and a half to get through case 1, which was only 3 episodes. So 5 episodes, 2 BOJs, 7 months is, it's insane. It's a massive improvement. I'm not discounting how far we've come in that regard. Like, I may be very pessimistic towards my own capabilities, but I can't deny the sheer effort that has been put in by a lot of people to help get to us to this point. So I don't know. It's not insane to be able to do. It just requires a lot of people putting that time and energy in, and people, sacrificing a bit towards it. Like, we do sacrifice for this place. People are like, oh, don't sacrifice, or don't put yourself, and don't do this and don't do that. And I'll be completely and utterly frank. Like, anyone who tells me to not sacrifice myself for this stuff, you're being too concerned for my sake. You're being, I don't want to call it helicopter parenting, but it's bad. It's in its own way toxic, because creative people and people who want to make stuff are gonna do it, and they are gonna hurt themselves doing it, because that's the joy of creation. It's not about doing things like the best situation is you make something, you have fun doing it, it's always a growth, it's always wonderful, you're always happy, life never gets in your way, you're just able to live. But not to get too philosophical, life is struggle, life is pain, existence is pain, to put it on more jovial, funny terms. We will suffer. We are going to make ourselves suffer. It's just part of the process, especially when you're trying to make something that you are ultimately proud of. You can't spend time. Some people can just spend time and just make out a banger in like 2 hours. And, those people, they are true artists in the sense of like talent. That sort of leadership point I mentioned earlier about innate talent versus practice. Not everyone can do that. 0.01% of the people can do that. And those people who can do it, lucky to them. People like myself who don't have that natural capability, we just have to keep struggling, and we will struggle. And a lot of people do try to make art and try to be creative, and they understand that principle. I think anybody who has ever made anything ever at any point in time understands just how shit it really is. And it's probably why a lot of people get really upset about sort of the prevalence of AI nowadays is, and for obvious reasons, about the concerns over security and job security. But when you're suffering so much to make something, for something to do it without any suffering at all, or to look like it doesn't suffer, it's a bit of a slap in the face. I don't ever want to be told, don't compromise the health of the team. Because 1, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm not stupid. And 2, yeah. And I know most people don't say it like that. There's probably a small element of like, oh, I'm going to say the obvious thing because it's obvious, because I don't think you're a dumb shit, but like, I need to be able to show you that I'm also not a dumb shit. But, 1, don't believe I won't do that. And 2, there are people here who, whilst we do suffer, whilst, I'm going through the consequences of that suffering, I can't deny that I've been able to get stuff out of this, and I am doing my best to pass that down, and there are people who are getting things out of it as well. I mean, Galacon is a great example just to point to. That was an opportunity that would never have come my way if I hadn't suffered for it. The fact that I can say I have something with my name on it in a credit sense, something that I can kind of go, look, it's there. There's something on the internet that will be here. There is something that can outlive me, I suppose is the best way to put it, as long as, electricity still exists and the internet still exists, but that's its own concern. It's, there's you're going to have to excuse me because I'm a bit of I'm not a philosophy nerd. I did do it at university though. There's this concept I've really always found fascinating about, you die twice, the moment you die and then the moment that the last person remembers you. I love the fact that in some ways that second death can be somewhat prevented. I was going to do it anyway by trying to, hopefully one day have a family and have people who will remember me just from that level of interaction. Not to say a dynasty of anything like that, but I'm sure you could appreciate the term. But just be able to kind of fight that element of the future as well. That in itself brings so much self-actualization, to use a fancy term from psychology. I'm going to suffer. Bitches, get out of my way. Stop trying to stop me from suffering, because ultimately, if you want the shit that we're producing, someone's got to suffer for it. And right now, I'm probably not in the best position to be saying that I'm going to suffer more, because, as I say, I'm actually in a period where I'm healing. But we got we got to this point with a lot of people carving parts of themselves out. We need to kind of spend a bit of time healing. Hopefully we won't carve as much out of ourselves next time, but again, we are probably going to, because we didn't do all of that for nothing. I didn't spend a 19-hour workday once. Well, workday. I didn't spend 19 hours on a single bloody document with a cumulative of 200, 300 man hours between 3 people, just to kind of cash in at now. I have thought about quitting, as I said before. I have always had that, but there is an element of sunk cost fallacy in there too. But you don't give up on that stuff. So yeah, when people worry or keep telling me don't do this, or just, as I say, just don't. I'd much rather people say, hey, are you looking after yourself? Or, hey, how are you doing? Or, how's things been? Or
it's a valid question. It
is. It's creative types. I find it always weird kind of saying creative types, because I don't really see myself as a very creative person, even though I've just gone on a tirade about creativity. I'm much more of the kind of facilitator towards it. So I guess that's why I'm quite a kind of third party, or I sound very detached from that level or that type of group. It's because I find myself more as the enabler. And I found that people who do create, they often do lack an element of humanity given to them. Not in the sense that people don't think of them as human. It's very easy to kind of go, I know this person because of this thing I like that they make. You're not liking them though. And it's also a good distinction to make, because it's how I see art in general. People make stuff, you can dislike that person, you can dislike that thing, you can dislike the element about them, but the art is different to them. And equally, when people engage with stuff like this, with EOJ or anything else, I do think that there is that disconnect, unfortunately. People don't really think about you, the person. They think about you in the person insofar as the product. And that's not a fault of anyone. I do it. I mean, I do it with all the bloody media I consume. When I'm playing Hearts of Iron, like I was doing earlier, I'm not thinking about people at Paradox. I don't even know who the bloody lead director of Hearts of Iron is, or any of the community people. I've got no knowledge on that. But I would be super stoked if they suddenly came up and they sat down, or they dropped me an email and be like, hi, I want to talk to you. And I'd be like, oh my God, I love this game, or it's so much fun. I can automatically start to appreciate that. I would not care about what they had for breakfast. I just care about the fact that I like the thing that they've done. So I do think there is an element that people need to be wary if they're going to give statements of advice like that, or just any form of advice. Don't take a step back and just kind of go, why are you giving that advice? Is it because you care about the person, or you care about the person insofar as the product, which is still caring for the person? It's just, I think people need to be more aware of their own shortcoming in that regard. Care for people. If you're only going to care about someone because of something they make, that's fine. I don't think anyone's going to be too upset to have someone actually enjoying the stuff they make, or being interested in them because of the thing. It's just we've got to be more self-conscious or more self-aware if we are going to make those statements. And as I say, those who do make those statements, I'm just going to turn around and tell you I'm still going to do it anyway, because bloody hell, someone has to. So, hey, don't say that stuff to me, basically, is the long and short of it. Someone's going to suffer. It's probably going to be.
That's an indirect way of saying piss off.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I don't want people to piss off, obviously, but yes. In some ways, piss off.
I'm not going to agree with everything that you've said regarding suffering is necessary and all that. I suffer for your art and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand that, but I'd probably not to the extent maybe you do. I'm saying perhaps maybe take a few steps back. Of course, there's going to be challenges to even a project that runs really well is going to have challenges, regardless of how well it's run and what have you. But all I'm saying is, from my perspective, is it's not worth breaking your back over something. Even a series as good as this, I'm going to make the argument that maybe try not to fall back into, for lack of a better term, bad habits, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because there's running the risk of, after the hiatus, I suppose. You probably run the risk of, oh shit, I should be doing something, basically, and maybe you start getting back into old habits of the stuff that didn't work properly, like in terms of production and stuff like that. But it's you definitely have the tenacity to say, I'm not going to let this thing, as to the best of your ability. You're saying you're not going to let EOJ. You're gonna be there. I'm getting the impression that you're going to be there to the very end, basically, and get the thing over the line. And I have every confidence that the team will and yourself will get there in the end. Again, but as I say, it's a very slippery slope, and it can be a dangerous thing to maybe accept the notion that suffering is a constant, I suppose. That's for the lack of a better term, or suffering is expected. Maybe that's. I don't probably agree with that entirely, but again, it's very interesting that you believe that. But I'm from my personal perspective, I think again you're putting way too much pressure on yourself. From my personal perspective, again,
yeah, no, of course,
I will take. But I'm not trying to tell you to suck eggs, of course.
No,
but that's from my perspective as an outsider. We'll do a summary in a moment, of course. Too long didn't read. I put for people who are watching this on YouTube, I put little summary on the screen for people who just want to get to the rest of the podcast. Of course, I'll put a summary. But unless there's anything else that you want to discuss before we move on to anything else,
it's not that really discuss. It's just I think more of a kind of a forewarning is that what I've just discussed thus far is probably 1/10 of the whole iceberg. So, yeah,
you can keep going by all means. You've got the floor.
It's not about going. It's just I think for anybody who wants to dig deeper and for the eventual kind of retrospective when that whoever gets made, if it ever gets made, it's kind of everything I'm saying here is intense and it is a lot just by itself. But take it with also the added fact that this is just 1/10 of everything that's happened. If you feel exhausted listening to this now, there's more that's happened that I don't have the time to go into, and neither do I think should be the focus of this, because ultimately we're talking about what led to the hiatus. So just I feel like that's the biggest thing I want people to take away from it. Appreciate that. Or maybe as a response to your comment of why I'm being too hard on myself. Yes, maybe I do have a very pessimistic view on things, but in some ways it's a habit that's been ingrained into me because of my experience, rather than one that I choose to just take for the sake of taking. So, yeah, it's I mean. I don't know if, truthfully, if I'll be here at the end of this. I've always believed personally that the best mark of a leader is not about the ability to see something through to the end, but being able to make their next generation of leader. I've always seen leadership as a not self-fulfilling prophecy, as a sort of replicating thing. A good leader,
a facilitator.
Yeah, exactly. I am a leader through facilitation. I believe that if I can make the next leader after me better than me, that's my sign as a leader that I have succeeded. Because so much of human history, whether that is military or political or religious or whatever, Catherine the Great from Russia, her dynasty, her sons were apparently completely useless compared to her, and likewise the Kaiser after what's his name from the advisor to the Kaiser, Bismarck. He advised the Kaiser, said don't do this. Kaiser absolutely went off on a bender and caused World War One. So, like, there is so much stake that you have to put into people who come after you, in my opinion, that if I'm not here at the end of it, but someone who is capable is, I'll be happy. And if no one is able to ultimately step up to do that, that's fine. EOJ is one part of my life. I mean, it's crazy enough to say that, like, as I say, I've got a full-time job, part-time service, reservist, and everything else in between. Personal life, relationships. I love video games. Like, this is one aspect of my life. So if I don't end up seeing it through to the very end, well, I'm glad I just don't have to worry about everything kind of collapsing around me, if that makes sense. It would be a massive change to my life, don't get me wrong, and it's why I'm very hesitant to ever pull the pin, as some people affectionately put it. But hey, that's life. You never know what's going to happen, and boy howdy did last year teach me that lesson. God almighty. So
my goodness. Take a breather. I'm glad you've got all that off your chest, of course, but I'm glad you've really appreciate you going through all that, and I hope that the listeners really, and fans of EOJ, appreciate more of the context that you've gone into there. So I think that's a good place to leave the hiatus behind now, and we move on to the main part of the podcast. So the main summary then, so EOJ, oh, for God's sake, I put my teeth in. EOJ will be going on hiatus until 2025, so that basically means episodes 3-6 onwards will not be appearing until next year. So this is, I think, this is your last major appearance publicly, I should say, until at least BronyCon UK. Oh, what's it called? PonyCon UK. So
UK PonyCon, yeah, which is in October. So it's only a month or so away. But yeah, like in terms of getting out in terms of like presenting stuff, we're unlikely. I'm not going to say we won't, but we're unlikely to have anything else come out this year, or at least there will not be a consistent thing this year. If there's going to be consistent like monthly release like we've had, it will be next year.
So yeah, so that's the main takeaway. So the hiatus until 2025. The no confirmed date as of yet. I'm not going to put your feet to the fire to say when you coming back. When you coming back? Like, where were you in the night of the 23rd? I don't know. I don't know. Leave me alone. It will EOJ will return. That's the best gist I've got. But you just got to wait a little bit longer until 2025.
Yes,
that's the main gist I want to communicate to everybody. If I haven't done so already. Right. So let's leave that behind now. Let's go on to the original part of the podcast, which I originally planned, but the hiatus was like the massive thing that. So we've added on as an extra, but call it a bonus if you like. But let's start off with, so how exactly did the EOJ project come about, and what sort of specific circumstances come into play for a sequel to Turnabout Storm to be even considered? So, as a bit of context, for people who don't know, Turnabout Storm was the original. It came out in, was it 2012? I believe it finished. So very early fandom. This was.
Yeah.
MLP, Phoenix Wright crossover, and quite notable for being one of the earliest projects that actually got to the end, and it's still remembered fondly in the fandom, myself included. It does have its issues. especially in the early episodes where it's a bit, it's fair to say it's a bit lo-fi. That which makes sense how based on the circumstances it was put together in the early episodes where like maybe the microphones were not so great, and the people behind it were still very much learning how to put such a project together. But like it was really ambitious, and it's still remembered fondly. But what I want to know is like, what was the impetus for EOJ or a sequel to be actually? Who come up with the idea to actually make a sequel to that?
So originally, so I've alluded to it previously, but the original creator was the Aljavis, and he his belief was, or not necessarily his belief, sorry, his motivation was to try and get something over the line, in essence, to actually have something that made it to the point of delivery. Because, unsurprisingly, as you mentioned, with the popularity that Turnabout Storm was able to bring, a lot of people tried to make something of a continuation to it. There was obviously fan fictions, there was some art, there was Turnabout Storm the Other Side as a kind of a side project to kind of go in concurrence with Turnabout Storm. There was My Little Investigations, which is probably the most well-known continuation aside from ourselves. So there was a lot of things that were generated, a lot of things that were brainstormed, but none of them ever really survived. Like My Little Investigations is completely buried, stopped development. The Turnabout Storm the Other Side apparently was an absolute nightmare of a production from the small bits I've been told. I have no idea, I was never there. But it was not a pleasant place to be. And all the fan fictions and everything else just, again, they never took off. There's a part of me, and this is where I make my next controversial point, a part of me who's very annoyed that Fallout Equestria made it as big and Turnabout Storm stuff never actually continued as highly, personally. that one's probably
let's call it Rivalry, but
you could call it Rivalry. I mean, I can go on the whole tirade about what I think about Fallout Equestria because I haven't read it and I shouldn't actually make a comment until I have done so. But there's aspects tied to the project which makes it quite funny as to why there's a bit of bad blood there. But
right, okay.
Yeah, again, when I mentioned like it's 1/10 of the thing with the hiatus, boy howdy, am I not being facetious there? Anyway, so going back to your question, the fact that nothing really made it to creation was just depressing. And for myself, being only about 12 at the time when Turnabout Storm came out, and kind of not forgetting about it, but kind of just going through the brony community. You'll have to excuse me, and to everyone else listening, I use the brony community very kind of dirtily, and that's a personal choice. I don't consider myself one. I am what I like to think of as an MLP fan, for the reasons I kind of mentioned in the hiatus. Getting sent stuff was not particularly encouraging to be in that community. So just in case anyone wonders why I sound really weird whenever I say it, that's part of the reason.
Sorry, as quick as a side, like, the term is quite a bit of a loaded term, isn't it? Depending on how you look. So without going into too much detail, I understand where you're coming from. A lot of people, like, it's just like weird connotations to it, but please continue.
No, it's fair. I mean, it's something that I think people on the stream were also like slightly surprised with, or someone I remember seeing in the chat being like, "No, brony for life." It's like, no, definitely not.
No, like, keep away.
You go do that. You enjoy that term. I'm glad it
you
worked.
Sit over there away.
No. I don't. Like, I go to brony conventions that describe themselves as brony conventions. I can't exactly be like, oh god, I can't stand those bronies. Like, fuck off. No, I just don't like describing myself as such. But again, to avoid rabbit holing too far, I also shared that sentiment regarding the fact that nothing ever made it to the point of delivery with Turnabout Storm, and I did enjoy reading and seeing what came about. I never actually knew about my little investigations until I started doing EOJ stuff, but I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been very sad if I'd gotten super hyped for it and it went nowhere. So actually having a sequel that happens, that can be told, that is being told, big driver for the original creator, and for myself, and that's part of the reason why we keep fighting onwards. That's the reason why we keep doing what we're doing, is to deliver. There's also a sense of pride, bringing back that rivalry point with Fallout Equestria. How many Fallout Equestria things are there? Is just a bit of a facetious rhetorical question I will ask to nobody in particular. Like, how much is there? A lot. Some may say too much. I don't know. But it is, there was a very bad take I saw from someone that if you banned Fallout Equestria, you'd effectively be banning the brony community. No. No.
No.
No.
No.
Not the hottest take from said individual, but I say that there's quite a lot of Fallout Equestria stuff there. But when you think about My Little Pony Ace Attorney, there's 4 things. And like, if you want to talk about things that actually are, for lack of a better term, you can enjoy Case 1 and Case 2, like they're finished products. There's an end to those particular things. It's not an end to EOJ per se, so it's a little unfair. But there's so little Turnabout Storm related material. It's just sad, and it's also what makes us feel so much, I don't know, confidence, is that nobody can really copy this. Like, I don't mind when people say, hey, can I like dub this with voice actors or stuff. It's like, yeah, go ahead, because they'll then ask for like, do you have the original project files? Like, no, we don't. Like, you can't copy this. There is like, we've got a final render of everything. Like, I have a render of every single episode saved somewhere in case something happens, but like, you cannot physically copy this stuff because it's just insane. Like, it's stupid. This entire thing shouldn't exist. Yeah, for you know, reasons related to production, related to story, just everything. This entire idea is insane. It's mad. It's stupid. It's ridiculous, even. And it shouldn't be able to exist, but it does. And the fact that we can make it exist, the fact that it does have some, you know, the fact that it is a thing in itself is just a massive, massive ego boost for us. So to wrap all of that up, originally it was to keep to actually have something that you know, was a sequel to Turnabout Storm actually make it to delivery, and now it is about showing that it can still live, that it still does exist, and also because we feel like we are a part of we're original. It's original. When you think EOJ, there is new stuff in EOJ that doesn't exist in any other setting, really. Like, not the Ace Attorney and MLP stuff. Turnabout Storm definitely is the originator of that. But there is a bunch of new original characters with new identities, new personalities. Of course, Sonata and Philo Reed aren't new. I can't claim that. That would be very unfair. But there's, like, several new OCs from, like, Case 2, Case 1, and Case 3 is going to have so much more. So that originality, that, to me, is why I'm driven to keep this going, or to make this even, because, yeah, sure as shit needs some more originality in the MLP space right about now, especially considering the fact that, well, with G4 being, you know, long since buried, sort of, kind of, I mean, G5 is kind of have aspects of it, I don't keep up with it, but the old thing that got a lot of people into it being past its prime, yeah, it's just nice to say, hey, look, there's still fresh material to work from. There is new ideas. It isn't just Little Pip and Blackjack. Again, it is Equity. It is Fated Pursuit. It is Fair Devotion, Sugar Stamp. And to be fair, it's so cool to see recently as well that art has just been appearing out of nowhere. On like Derpy Buru for like Elements of Justice stuff. Like, someone is going around adding a bunch of stuff that has just existed in like the MLP ether, like sphere. Like it's just appearing, like constantly now seeing new pictures and new posts and new stuff. Like I think our tag's up to like 189, where it was like 100 before, or maybe even less than 100. Like it's cool, it's great. It's like, yes, there is stuff and it is being produced. Hell yeah. So long answer to a very simple question, but that should be apparent by now.
But yeah, it's just so great to see you animated on this stuff. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So let's go on to the next. So how exactly did you get involved with the project? Of course, you've mentioned before you weren't always the project lead of EOJ. You worked as you worked in all sorts of different, based on the Galacon presentation. You've been in several positions. So how exactly did you get involved in the first place?
So for me, I got started. What's the Ace Attorney joke? It was not Christmas, or it was Christmas. Point is, around Christmas of 2020, I applied to join as what's known as an audio engineer. So for people who aren't aware, that's the type of person who will listen to audio and try to make it sound less scuffed, a little clearer. Because when you record, like now, for example, you will pick up a lot of bad stuff as well as good stuff. So audio engineers clean that audio. Preferably, they try to make it clean from the point of capture, but we're not professionally studioed here, so that's not going to happen. But the main job initially was just to help Soundman, who is now my assistant director. So he was originally my team leader, and now he's my assistant director. Just with going through the mountains, the hours of audio files that existed, and just labeling takes and identifying which takes were good, and figuring out what needed to be sent back to get re-recorded. Slave labor in some may put it, and it's certainly laborious. Oh boy. No, we have a system, we have a piece of automation software which speeds that process up ridiculously now, so much so that I for episode 5 did all the splicing by myself. So an hour-long episode, cancel, I did 90% of it by myself, and then I had 10% help. So going from where you needed 3-4 hands to splice an episode to one person doing it on a crap ton of energy drinks in 2 days, yeah, things are good. So that was how I got started, bashing my head against Audacity and splicing and labels. And then after that, moved into PR because I really wanted to push the PR angle. I do love digital marketing. Have a bit of a thing for it. If you can tell by the fact that I'm doing a digital online series, and from there it was just picking up little bits and bobs here and there, just filling in gaps when the project needed a little bit more management to manage it. I just stepped into leadership position after leadership position, and then in August of 2022, I think I got my dates wrong earlier. I said I became assistant director in 2022, but I actually became director in 2022. Oh no, I became assistant director as well. There was a very short period of time where I basically just jumped from job title to job title. So
many hats.
Yeah, many hats, very, very quickly. But it was audio engineer, PR team lead, EOJ director, to then assistant director to director, and now to owner. That's kind of the simple way of putting it. With owner happening last year and director and assistant director sometime in 2022.
You've already covered a lot of this stuff already. With what are the challenges and difficulties of running quite a sizable, ambitious project such as this one? I think you've already covered a lot of that in the hiatus section.
Yeah. What's new?
As we've demonstrated. What's new with you? What else haven't you covered? But I think, unless there's anything else you want to add to that, I can move on to the next thing. But yeah.
Honestly, how do I put this? There is one thing I didn't touch. I kind of briefly touched it. The biggest challenge really is just, time zones, as I mentioned in the panel, to kind of keep a more jovial aspect. Time zones are an absolute fucking nightmare, and never ever be the leader of something where a majority of the people are 5 to 8 hours behind you. It never ends well. And the biggest problem really is just sometimes people don't act mature. There have been a lot of people in the team who unfortunately departed on very bad terms. There's people who have tried their best to create unnecessary stress and torment for others within the team. Sad to say that unfortunately one of the previous members has tried very aggressively to publicly humiliate one of our team members several times over. People sometimes aren't very mature, and it's terrible when you have to be the person to stand up and say, stop being a dick cunt.
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like being an asshole. I don't like booting people. I do it. Like, I've had to remove several people from the team. And I will continue to do so if I believe that people are not actively working towards making the place safer, better, fun, or not doing their duties. Like, that's just part of being a leader. But I don't like it. I prefer to rehabilitate, especially in the sense that we're all volunteers anyways, so there's no point casting people out for just, making a mistake. Like, that's not how people grow. But yeah, it's unfortunate to say that being on something this big, on top of all the production and all the madness and all the time zones, the human element can just be awful sometimes. 60 people, 70 people, 80 people at one point. It's going to happen. Like, it's dumb to assume that you're not going to come across somebody who is going to act silly or be an asshole. But it's not fun. And I would definitely say for anyone who is about to get into such a thing, vet your people, make sure you have a good code of conduct, which we do, thankfully, that you can, hold people and yourself against, which is something that I had to do in January as well, is I had to hold myself to my own code of conduct and, in essence, punish myself for bad behavior, and just do your best to not let bad stuff fester for too long. And when bad stuff does happen or bad people act, well, just get on and make sure that you look after the people who ultimately do matter, which is, your team. Serve your team. To serve to lead, as the officer mantra of the United Kingdom goes, or to lead to serve. I can't remember which way it goes, but that's unfortunately that's the biggest weakness, biggest drawback of leading something this massive.
Right, gotcha. Again, like a lot of personnel to not take care of, but a lot of again, it's a part of the whole bigger puzzle. A lot of moving parts, like having a lot of people to oversee is quite a challenging thing to do, especially if a few of them decide to act the goat in different ways. But that's an unfortunate thing that does happen sometimes. So what would you say is there any particular aspect of production that you enjoy most about EOJ? I can't speak.
It's all good, don't worry.
I'm going to edit that out. It won't have happened. But yeah, what particular aspect do you enjoy the most about the project?
So I kind of made mention of it on the sort of hiatus stream, but I didn't. I've said so much in the past week or so that I actually don't know what I have or haven't said. But to make sure that I do say it now, at least, it's working with voice actors. It's working with people making the characters come to life and being able to guide them, give them direction, give them transmitting the idea of the way you see something going down into their head and getting them to bring out their performance with it. I remember early in Case 2, kind of one of the few positive stories that I do have about Case 2 was taking Optic Rainfall, the turning page VA, transitioning him from someone who had massive anxiety about his performance because the voice wasn't quite easy for him to achieve, to really confident and actually able to deliver his lines independently with my guidance. And that was before I started voice directing. Get into I've mentioned this. I think I mentioned it at the panel. Probably didn't, but I've mentioned it at other panels previously. Thanks to one of the team leader of the VAs, MLP Arts, who was at the time acting as studying under Michelle Kraber, the voice actress for Apple Bloom and the singing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so she was she was understand. She was just in one of the what they call Kraber courses, I think it was referred to as. She financed a whole load of courses for EOJ VAs to sit down with Monique and Michelle Kraber to practice their characters and also get some industry leading advice on how to voice act. That stuff was like ridiculously valuable for myself as well from a director standpoint, because I was able to listen, I was able to hear what they were saying, and things that they were telling VAs I could take away for my own benefit to then guide other VAs. And the biggest piece of advice we got from that is, remember, it's voice acting. It isn't just voicing. You have to bring out the character. You have to give that energy, and you can do it in so many different ways. So yeah, for me, I'm most energized when I'm sitting down with someone and just getting the performance right, getting it right, getting the character moments, spot on, and just hearing it come to life in the way that you wanted it to. There is genuinely nothing better, at least for me. I mean, some people really love the editing, but nah, it's always the voice. Probably because I wanted to do voice acting for the series before I realized I cannot compete with some people.
And I guess you could say, well, like it's always, again, like I will point this out because this is quite a British episode. It's both of us British, of course.
Yes.
I suppose like there's always the low hanging fruit of like oh, he's British, stupid voice, that kind of thing as well. That's probably part of it as well. Maybe I get a lot of stick for that in my own server, like, oh, you stupid British. Yeah, it's the silly British once again. But yeah. Causing chaos and ruining everything, but yes, that's. I thought I'd bring that up as a side point. So, on the voice acting, when you actually like looking over the recordings and things, do you actually get like some of the VAs in like a Discord call and you actually go over the lines with them like live, or how does it work exactly? Do they send you recordings and you like oversee, oh, that's a good take, or that's not a... How does that work exactly? So
our process follows a very simple pipeline, and I use the term pipeline a lot because you just need pipelines and processes with this place. So script is created, it's drafted, goes through several rounds of drafting. It goes to what's known as a draft 4, at which point we consider it done. But before we release it for the VAs, it goes for another 48 hours of final review where we go. So we sometimes will have a script done and go and write 4 or 5 more and then come back to it with whatever we've written afterwards, helping to make sure that anything we've said before lines up a little bit more tighter. If people work in the tech sphere, you'll know that that's kind of similar to a process called agile development. So yeah, I've applied software tech design principles into a creative process, sue me. But when that's ready, once we have a good script, it goes to the voice actors and actresses. And then previously, I used to host the table reads. However, because of the time zone difference I mentioned before, no one could ever really make them, and it ended up being a bit of a wash. So I instead now hand that to my team lead at MLP Arts, who is 8 hours behind, in the latest time zone, so thereby she can lead those table reads. That usually is just a period of time where we have all the VAs sit down, talk about, just read through the script, quite literally a table read, no recording, no expectation to deliver perfect takes, ask questions, confirm they understand, give a little bit of pointed feedback on like how to deliver something, just really communicate their wants and desires. Then they go away and they record. I usually give them about a month to record, 4 weeks, just so that, they can get on with life. And sometimes they've got a lot to record. So if they're working full time, obviously they're only going to have the evenings and afternoons and the weekends. So that's usually 4 weekends. I tend to work on weekends rather than weeks, actually, because that's the only time most people have free time. And then after that, it comes to me and the splicing team. We go through the audio, I listen to the takes, we extract them, so we go down to find a take of each line, listen to them, then I put them together, listen to the scene as a whole to see if it works, and then if things don't connect well, then I go and say, look for another take. If there's none in the file, I then ask for a retake. Once I've got that retake, I then check that it works again and do that process as many times as necessary, and then finally we send those to the editors. However, that's not when we're finished, because even though it's gone to the editors, at any point the editors can say this take doesn't sound good in the general sphere of things, or I want something with a bit more energy for this particular reason, so then I can send another retake request, which then, after we've gone through the polish of editing, the VAs can put that episode to bed. That's kind of like an overview of how the process works. It is unnecessarily complicated, but it is the best way to ensure decent quality at the very least.
As again, as I was saying before, like a lot of moving parts. That's just one aspect of the production. That's just the voice acting segment. Let alone the programming and the artists and everything else that goes into it in the background, and finalizing and rendering and all the rest of it. There's a lot going on. That's pretty damn crazy. All right, go on then. Who's your favourite voice actor then on the project then?
Oh.
Go on then.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, put me on the spot.
You don't have to answer that. I was joking. You don't have to answer that.
I won't say who my favourite is, because I don't have a favourite per se, but there are some people I really do want to like highlight as like spectacular. So I'm Shadow, who is well known in the Brony community already, puts on an incredibly good Celestia and an impressive Spike as well. Very, very impressed with her Spike. Canadian dude, I should say, who, funnily enough, was the voice actor for A Swift in Turnabout Storm. He also voices Philo Reed, and I love his energy. He's always got so much good energy. Pretzelman, who voiced Private Eye in Case 2. Wonderful. He beat me to being British. He beat us to be British, I should say, actually, since you're British as well, which says a lot for a guy who is not British.
British.
Fespio, the Wilsonator, I love his judge, always on point with his judge. Kaelin VO does a really impressive Trucy. And Thea, a new addition to the team, has done an incredible job on Spitfire and Trixie as well. And MLP Arts, as team leader, is insane with Rainbow Dash. She has had to do it once or twice. And fun story from when we were doing the Kraber courses, when she did do a practice line of Rainbow Dash, Michelle was visibly confused, thinking that it's not... it is AJ Bridal, isn't it, I think, who voices her, thinking that it was actually the VA of Rainbow Dash who had done that line. She does an insanely, on-voice Rainbow Dash. Unfortunately, it's outside of her voice range, so she can't do it. But Muse Script is our current VA for Rainbow Dash, does an excellent job as well. So, that's just a few. I could go through everybody and extol a lot of their virtues. Athena, one last person I do have to mention, Adox. Adox is Athena, really carried Case 2 alongside Goddess's Luna, but I've got to give props to Adox for that, because bloody hell. I think out of all the characters that were doing stuff, she had the most emotional range she had to play around with, and boy howdy did she deliver. So yeah, those aren't my favorites. Those are just people that I have massive respect for their talents, and it shows, I think, in the product. But everyone in the VA team has earned their spot without question as well. I should make that bloody well clear. Definitely. I think you may not know this, most people probably won't, but those who were in the fan server would know that when we initially did the voice casting for Case 3, I think we had 500 auditions across the 12 characters that we had going, and I listened to every single one of those voice auditions, I need to state, at least twice, and then I took the people we wanted, cut that down to 50 people, 30, I can't remember, somewhere between that numbers, and then had to do a whole nother load. So we went through a lot of stuff. We went through a lot of audio, we listened, we vetted, we did everything in our power. And yeah, as I say, people who got here on good merit. People who got the roles got them on merit and on their capabilities. So those are just some people I want to highlight, but I think a lot of people in the VA team, should be proud of themselves for how much competition they've had to go up against.
That's, as I say, singing the praises of the voice actors. I can't think of a lot of them. Everybody in the episodes I've seen has been brilliant, and it's really difficult to pinpoint particular favourites and stuff like that. It's very, very difficult. So I don't I answer that with like basically I don't really have a retort. I don't have any favourites, so, but it's just like I don't have a retort to that, so I can't really pinpoint anybody. But like everybody on the team's done an absolute fantastic job. But yeah, so yes, is one for you. So a lot of the listeners, of course, and people who watch EOG, of course, are going to be familiar with MLP, but not everybody is going to be necessarily familiar with Phoenix Wright as an IP, or might have even played the games. Is it still possible for anybody who might only be familiar with one of the two IPs still enjoy EOJ, or would you recommend everybody like watching the show and playing a few of the games first before jumping into it?
So this is ultimately a question of people's preference. So we take place between season 4 and 5 of MLP, and take place after Dual Destinies, because at the time when the series was first being created back in 2015, before loads of mayhem happened, that was the most up-to-date stuff at the time. Now obviously there's been 5 more seasons of MLP and a whole new generation, and there's also been Spirit of Justice. So to try and give a fair answer, I think it's probably wise if people watch Turnabout Storm at the bare minimum. People should know what Ace Attorney is in general. They should, if they don't want to get spoiled, get up to Dual Destinies in the story. And for MLP, if they want to have a bit of context towards who characters are and why one of them has wings when she originally had a horn, obviously get to season 4. It's hard to say because, like, some people found Ace Attorney through Turnabout Storm, so I don't think it's essential to watch both. But we are fans of both, and that's something I think also people seem to forget is like we're fans too. Like, we may make stuff, but we make stuff because we love the thing that we love the original source that we're making it from. So I don't think it's necessary. I think it's recommended though. So a bit of a politician's answer in that one. It's like a yes, but actually no.
Yeah, but no, but kind of, but no, but yes.
Yep.
Yes. I think that's fair. Yeah. Again, I will clarify that point. I will add to the point that you've made. Like, yeah, watching the original Turnabout Storm is, I would say, paramount. I'd say over everything else, watch that first. What I did was, after Galacon, I hadn't watched it for several years. So what I did was, when I landed back in Birmingham and went home from there, I spent the next 2 or 3 days re-watching the original series again, because I couldn't remember what half of the stuff was happening. So re-watch that as a minimum to get a concept of the original characters and who was in it and what happened, because mainly because a lot of the story beats EOJ plugs into is a direct sequel to what happened in Turnabout Storm, but except much more greatly expanded fashion. So that is, I would say, that is paramount. In terms of the games, again, a lot of listeners and people, I think it's safe to say 90% of the listeners and viewers of this podcast and are going to be familiar with the Friendship with Magic series anyway. That's going to be a given anyway, but not everybody's necessarily going to have played any of the Phoenix Wright games. I used to watch a lot of the Flash cartoons of back in the days of Newgrounds. Phoenix. I've watched a lot of Phoenix Wright cartoons back in the day.
Yep.
I'm aware of most of the plot beats, what happens in the plot and stuff in the earlier games anyway. But I haven't really played them in quite a good while. So, being familiar with Phoenix Wright maybe not as essential as watching Turnabout Storm itself.
Yes.
I think that's the crucial thing. That's definitely recommended, but you can still very much enjoy it if you're not really 100% familiar with the Phoenix Wright property. I think in that respect.
Yes.
So I think that's a fair statement to think based on my experiences anyway. But yeah, go back to Turnabout Storm again briefly. Of course, it did set quite a high bar again. It wasn't perfect as a project. There is issues with it, of course, and looking back with rose-tinted spectacles and stuff, looking back at it with a fine comb or whatever, you can see where there's particular issues with it and stuff like that. But it's still has a place in a lot of people's hearts and stuff like that. So when you're basically making EOJ, does it ever feel daunting to feel that you're following on from Turnabout Storm's legacy when working on in the episodes? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So this is where my ego side comes out again.
Go right ahead.
One of the big things I had going into Case 3, part of the reason why I had such a long tirade about the Case 2, Case 3 distinction is I don't think I think Case 1 is a perfectly fine introductory case. It's messy, but, you know, hey, we've been away for several years. Hey, let's get back into pony and lawyers. And then Case 2 just kind of overcomplicates everything and makes it weird. For me, I see Case 3 as being good as, if not greater than, Turnabout Storm when it's finished. I think it's stronger. I think it's going to hit harder. I think people are going to love it more. Now, whilst we're only 5 episodes in, a lot of people are very confused. A lot of people are very, like, all over the place with stuff, as you also previously alluded to earlier in this podcast. There is a lot of story beats happening. Part of the reason why Case 2 is annoying, but there is so much investment we've put into this, and there's going to be a lot of, like, boom, shall we say. Like, if people think that the nukes are going off now, no, we are, as much as I may not necessarily have as much as there's a rivalry for Fallout Equestria, I do have fun with Fallout as a series. So we're in the pre Great War segment of this, or the the nukes have not dropped. We're in the tension where, like, I think America is invading the Chinese mainland or something. I can't remember the law too much. Long and short of it is, they haven't started falling. They are going to fall. That's when people should really start to make the comparisons between Case 2 and Case 3, because so how does that tie back to the point about, you know, is it scary to kind of follow in Turnabout Storm's footsteps? Well, yeah, but I've said it before as well. We're one of the few groups of people who can. In fact, I think we're probably the only group of people who will make something that follows on from Turnabout Storm in the same medium as it. There is obviously like a fan fiction which several people in the team do not like. I think even Neo Artemis themselves distance themselves from that fan fiction due to weird creative decisions taken by the writer on that one.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, it's a daunting task, but I'm confident that we're going to match it and we're going to beat it, because whilst we've, from a technical standpoint, it's been a decade since Turnabout Storm, so we've obviously, got that advantage. Turnabout Storm had one case, one single murder in inverted commas, because we all know how that one ends. This has 5 cases, and admittedly, whilst the setup for the first 2 has not been very cohesive, we've done a bloody awesome job of making it tying together to actually, finish it. The best way to put it is, bit of a shaky start. The center is now where the groove is starting to really set itself. The finish, in my opinion, should be awesome. But I think it will start here with Case 3. I think Case 3 will be on par with Turnabout Storm in terms of just the quality. It won't be, it does take a genius to also just look at the YouTube channel itself. It's not going to reach the same level of popularity that Turnabout Storm did in terms of view counts and stuff, because one, Brony community kind of not as big as it was back in the fucking literal early days, 2011, 2012. That's lightning in a bottle moment. But I do know for a fact that in terms of engagement via comments, I've noticed that we seem to do better per view to comment ratio. So I'm confident. I'm gonna stop being too egotistical. I'm just gonna sum it up with, I'm confident that we can match it, and that we are going to excel over it, and that this will be better overall. May not be more popular, but that's fine. because if we wanted to be the most popular people in the community, we would have actually gotten this started back in 2013 or fucking 15, when there was people to actually give a shit. So popularity ain't much of a problem, but we'll still take everybody's attention if they're willing to give it.
So yes. So to add to your point, when we let's just say for comparison's sake that we're talking about Turnabout Storm and EOJ. EOJ definitely trumps the original series in practically every aspect already, in terms of production values, how it looks, and the voice acting. Well, of course, everything I believe is better about it. But what I'm a simpleton, as I've demonstrated already. But
no.
I just like the little things like Sonata has a shirt and tie now. I love that suit and tie. I just love little details like that. Let me demonstrate how much of a simpleton I am. But for the listeners at home anyway. Like when I was talking to Mr. G, talking about getting the podcast prepped and stuff like that. Like, can you provide me any notes and stuff? I think I asked the question about, have you got like a list of all the voice actors, I think I said, and like you paused for a bit and said, you didn't say it directly, but like basically said in a roundabout way, said, have you checked the credits?
Yeah.
Have you stupid man. I don't know why I thought that information would be hidden. I don't know why it occurred to me to ask that, but anyway, it was just, that's not my finest hour. But yes, but it's just great to see a lot of the story continuation proceeding from that, and in the same way that the original series, like original Turnabout Storm, was like improved as it went on. So is EOJ. Like in the early episodes, where, for example, you're still using the sprites for the human characters and stuff. That's completely gone now for Case 3 onwards. That now you've got really cool 3D models that like actually blend in with the actual surroundings of Equestria stuff. It's like stuff that you can see the series progressively get better visually and stuff like that. It's just wonderful to see, and like it's despite all the challenges you've all gone through, getting at least Case 2 up on the internet and stuff. Like I can, from watching Case 3 onwards, I can see everybody's starting to hit their stride and start to be more experimental with things and be a bit more daring with things, which is really cool to see. But I'm of course I'm biased, of course, but it's just stuff like that, It just makes me really, really happy to see it progress from that point. But yeah, it's awesome stuff. Right, so. Oh, another argument for me saying, well, I'm a simpleton, basically. Well, for people who don't know, like, of course, like I was at Galacon, of course, and I saw the actual panel that Mr. G was presenting, talking about EOJ and stuff like that. I did ask a question, as best as I could. I was kind of mumble-mouthed and stuff like that. So this is my take 2, if you like, I suppose, to get the... Because I really struggled to get that question out there. Like I was shaking like a leaf, and I was having a bit of a mare. Let's just put it politely, but if you excuse the pun. But ponies, but like, has the EOJ project at any point ran into difficulties in particular concerning copyright? Because you're dealing with two big IPs, MLP, and you're dealing with Phoenix Wright with Hasbro and Capcom, respectively. Any particular issues did you come across, or any of you come across while making the series, in regards to any copyright hurdles that you have to come across while making the series?
So, yeah, I remember your question, and it's always a question that gets asked. Interesting enough, like every convention I've been to, there's always been that question. So, not to say that you're unoriginal or anything by any stretch, God no. It just so happens that it
put me when I'm down.
It just does seem to be something that people ask a lot of questions. So I've said it. I'll say what I kind of said at the panel and try and delve a bit more into it with a more lucid head, as lucid as one can be after like 2.5 hours of speaking. Capcom owns Ace Attorney. Hasbro owns MLP. We do not purport to own. We do not purport to have claim to own. We do not purport that we have any ability to claim that we own those series. They are theirs. They will always be theirs. That is the intellectual property rights. My personal gripes with intellectual property law aside, that is the situation. So that's the kind of legal speak out of the way. In general, no. We did have an issue with copyright in relation to the Ace Attorney end credits theme, which for the Ace Attorney anime was called Message. Now we used that in case 2 alongside some custom-made graphics, and we also had some of our VAs sing that very same end song, so it's a cover. However, because obviously the melody is the same and YouTube will pick that stuff up, every single time the video would be claimed for copyright because of just that song. Nothing else in the bloody episode, just that bloody song. So, yes, we've had problems with copyright, but it's not been from Hasbro and it's not been from Capcom. Capcom, not to speak for their legal team and not to speak for their property rights, have always leaned towards creative good rather than creative bad, and I have massive respect for them on that one, hence why there's a disproportionate amount of Ace Attorney kind of like fan content games. It's prevalent, they're pretty open, as long as you don't paywall it, which we don't, and we don't intend to. People can watch it for free and they will always be able to watch it for free. They seem to be pretty chill with it. And Hasbro, I know where most of the people's fear with Hasbro comes from, but I really did look into this and I don't get people's obsession and fear because, Jan Animations got taken down and like a couple of other things have been taken down. Jan Animations Button Mash was a crying shame. However, let's be all frank and fair here. The reason we all fucking loved it so much was because of how goddamn show accurate it was. And
yes, that's the point. Yeah,
that is unfortunately the bugbear and the biggest issue is like it's so bloody good. That's what killed it. That's what got it killed because
it looked like an official property. That's
exactly. And that to me is not necessarily great, and it's a bad sign of like, oh wow, you've got a massive fucking lightning in the bottle. You're worried about this. Well done. And very much not doing anything poorly in terms of like social, whatever you call it. Like the content in no way, shape or form would have reflected badly on Hasbro. But I do understand the logical end game from it. It's like it's too good. It's too well made. And, I'm sure Jan Animations was absolutely gutted along with everybody else, but if there's any solace to take from it, that's one hell of a fucking compliment to be given that you're taken down because you are that fucking good. So, and most people don't. So I can say with certainty I'm not worried about copyright because if Hasbro looked at this and went, man, are they going to think that this is actually an MLP related thing when there is a non-canon voice work, weird ass bloody angles, murder, and a bunch of everything else involved in this series. I don't know what was going on. I don't know what to tell, truth be told. I mean, we've been marked made for kids on like one episode, but that's not even Hasbro's doing, so fuck knows. When it does come to copyright, sometimes I do think about it. It is there in the back of my mind, but to just kind of like clarify some things as well that probably most people are aware of or probably can gather. We don't monetize EOJ. We're not making money off of it. When people support us, it's explicitly going towards the team. It's the team. You're supporting the team, the people, not the product. You're not purchasing a product. You're not getting a product. Yes, the team makes the stuff, and yes, by supporting the team, you do support making that content, but no one is making money off of this. I'm not making a living off of it. What people do is help make the stuff happen. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there's probably some form of like legal argument that could be made, but I'm not worried about copyright because I don't intend to infringe it any more than one may assume one may have done so. I don't think people also need to be as concerned about Hasbro. Like, they do take stuff down regularly. I'm seeing that they're doing a little bit more of it recently. But I think most people who push that argument have pushed it because Jan Animations and also because other stuff that have been taken down rightfully, understandably, doesn't really, conform to Hasbro's position. Like, porn games, for example, I think is a good example of stuff that got taken down by Hasbro. Yes. So, like, I don't know. I feel like Hasbro gets given the bugbear quite often. They do probably hit a load more like copyright claims on things that don't deserve it as often, but I don't think the fear of God that everyone has is as reasonable. Though there is also them fighting herds, to be fair, which was another big one, but that had its own. That got a good ending in the end. Well, it got a bad ending in the end because it got.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, initially it got a good ending, and then they thought, everything went sour again, unfortunate. But that's another.
That's a whole different place.
That's an whole other thing for another day, I think. But yeah, if you come on the podcast again once again, we could probably talk about that. Yes,
I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't be able to talk about them fighting. I just love, as you can tell with my deer profile picture, I just love deers, and thereby I am.
Oh dearie me.
Oh dearie me, indeed. So therefore, I am definitely a Velvet fan. But yeah, no. There's no fear. There is like a concern. Like every time I get an email in the channel's email inbox, it does sometimes scare the shit out of me. It's like, oh god, what is this? But 9 times out of 10, it's just like YouTube creators monthly newsletter, and then some random ass stupid, one of those collaboration sale things. It's like, hi, would you like to own this toaster? We just need you to do like a promotional thing with this toaster. And it's like, huh? We're a goddamn fucking animated murder series. When the fuck are we going to talk about your goddamn toaster? Like, Jesus Christ.
Depends if the toaster's really nice.
True, I do need a toaster, but like, I had a power generator sales pitch come in, and I was like, fucking 5-minute video on this power generator. What the fuck do you think I do? Like, what? So, yeah. I'm more worried about those stupid collaboration emails than I am about a copyright one, but it does still give me a bit of a heart rate. My heart rate does pump up whenever I do get an official email come through from something.
Though it would be funny, like, for example, like if Sonata does like a random ad break and just breaks the fourth wall, like, now for Squarespace.
Oh my god. No. No.
I would be...
No. I have made it explicitly clear that I am never my price for a paid content in an EOJ episode is £1 million, and that is never going to change. Yep, if you want it, it's £1 million, and it is going to be whatever. If you pay me £1 million, fine, you get however long you want it. But like, that is, no one is ever going to offer that, and that's fine. I don't care. Like, that is my price. Market forces be fucking damned. I don't care about supply and demand. I don't care about equilibrium bullshit. That's my price. That's what I'm supplying it as. There ain't no demand for it. Well, tough fucking shit.
Tough to touch the nerve there.
I don't like. Oh my god, YouTube does this. It pisses me off with this fucking mid-roll nonsense. Like, they force you to have to put adverts at the beginning and the end. And initially, I want to just put ads at the unskippable ads. Sorry, skippable. Correction. They now make you have to put unskippable ads. I wanted just to keep skippable. But no, they forced unskippable ads on everybody. And then they try to force this mid-roll stuff. And I'm like, no, stop putting fucking mid-roll ads in my fucking episode. The worst part about being copyright claimed with messages is the fact that it just put like a bazillion goddamn ad breaks in the bloody episodes if you don't have an ad blocker, if you don't have premium, and it just ruins it. And I can't even edit those bloody ad breaks in the older episodes because, lo and behold, it's copyright claimed, so you don't get a choice of where those adverts come up. Yeah, God almighty.
My goodness. Oh, my goodness. Crikey O'Reilly. But,
yep.
But yes, I think we're on the final stretch now. Not long to go. The 3 hours have flew by. It's absolutely crazy. I hope you've enjoyed your interrogation, I suppose.
No, it's been great. I really do appreciate the invitation. I'm glad that you reached out after the panel. If there's anything, I didn't bore you to death, so that's always a good sign.
I got the impression that obviously I know that's the truth now, but because you were pressed for time and stuff, you was it like barely just over an hour or so just to cram as much as you can, and it's not enough. It's not enough.
No.
To talk about everything. Like, you just like, shit, the next thing's on, I've got to go now, bye. That kind of thing.
Yep.
But
Yep.
So, but I still recommend people still watch the VOD. I'll put links to everything in the show notes, like the original, the Galacon panel. I'll put the links to that, and I'll put a link to the, of course, the live stream VOD as well. So for more extra context for people who haven't seen those already, please go check those out for extra curricular content, if you like. So links are all there. I'll put them all there. I've got my work cut out to put everything in there. But yeah, I'll make sure everything is linked and everything. So please do check all that stuff out. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where like it was either at Galacon, it was either, that's the only thing I don't like about Galacon. I practically got to see everything I wanted to see, except it was either I had to make a decision between EOJ, your panel, and Dusty's panel, Dusty Cat's panel. So, that's really annoying. So it was, I think it was literally just a case of me looking in the little pamphlet thing, you know, the guide that everybody had. I had to make a decision: do I want to watch this one or do I watch that one? And I think it was literally the possible connection between Turnabout Storm. I looked to think. Because of course, like that was the first MLP panel I've ever been to, and it's only in the last last couple of years I've started re-engaging properly with MLP stuff and the fandom in general, from having not really engaging with it in any length of fashion for quite a long time. So it was a case of me being possibly interested in and seeing like if there's a connection there, and there was, and like it led from there. So I did watch Dusty's panel. I watched it on was it on Monday or the Sunday? I watched it on the VOD. So thankfully everything's recorded, so you can watch all the everything on YouTube, guys, if you want to see what the panel's about. Yes. But just watch it, by all means. Watch the EOJ panel, but skip the bit where I answer the question. Just skip that bit. just I cannot watch that bit because I'm cringing so hard right now. You have no idea. So I came up to the when you finish the panel, you came up to the. I'm just rambling on a bit, but I want to get this out of the way first. Went to the. You went to your desk, of course, like where you're selling like the desk mats and stuff like that, and all the other cool goodies. It took me about, like, I think for people listening at home, like, I think it took me like about 20 minutes to really decide what to buy. It's just like, I was just standing there like dial up kind of thing, not trying to load, I guess. But it was quite full on, that convention was. But I'm really glad I got to watch your panel, and everything I did was amazing. But it was a bit overwhelming in places. But yeah, what by all means, watch the EOJ panel, please, listeners. Just skip my bit, please. I'll ask you, please. just skip that bit. I don't know when I appear, but I'm acutely aware I'm probably on camera. Oh, god damn it. But anyway, that's what makes me a bit nervous. But anyway, so I think one final question before I leave you to disappear into the sunset, as it were. Within the context of EOJ, who would you say is your favourite character or characters in the series? So I guess you might have more than one. You might have just the one, or you could pick one human, pick one pony if it makes it easy for you.
So, like every good creator, I have a few, and they are both ones that I can't talk about in great depth because we haven't really revealed
spoilers.
Them yet.
No, okay,
yeah.
Right.
But to be fair, one of them I have shown off several times in teasers, and I showed them off in the. Actually, I showed two of them. Well, okay, I think I can say this much because I think it's quite a nice teaser in its own right, but it's also a fair statement. My favorite characters are several members of the High Council. Each of there just like it should probably be bloody obvious, but the High Council is a full set of characters, and so far you have seen as a collective 3 of them out of 6. So the last 3 are arguably my favorite. And I won't say for what reason. Each of them has some aspect, though, that I have put a little bit of myself into. So each of those characters reflects me a little bit. Not like me, the person. Well, they reflect elements that I am inspired by in some ways, and or elements that I have a mild fascination in. With one of them being very heavily inspired by myself to a small degree. But that, before anyone worries, not written myself into the story. God, no. More so the
self-insert alert.
Yeah, quite. It's not a self-insert. Bloody hell! I've already voiced one of the bailiffs, and that's bad enough as it is. Yeah, no. One of those characters I'm very keen to kind of like delve into for the personal side. And in terms of characters we've seen already. From the human side, I really do, as I said before, love Adox's performance. So I think Athena is definitely my favorite in terms of the human side. For the ponies, well, that's a tough one. I think Philo really does shine better than he was going to in My Little Investigations. We've already made this clear in like a director's commentary, but like having a character whose entire purpose was, I hate the fact that I work in the job I do, even though I'm the lead detective, and I hate the fact that it takes me away from being able to chase mares all the time, was so goddamn boring. So instead we turn him into a workaholic who's gay as fuck, and I cannot stop loving him because it really just added that extra flair and that sass and that energy in such a way that we just could not. I cannot see the idea that was originally there for Philo now. I just see gay Philo, gay detective, and yes. So maybe from a creative standpoint, Philo, just from like an enjoyment perspective, I've always been a stickler for the cute mares, so like Sugar Stamp is definitely up there. But honestly, yeah, my favorites have yet to come. So if that encourages people to keep an eye out for future episodes, or to be inspired to watch it, or to wait out for 2025 when we finally get around to the rest of K3, that can be the kind of the breadcrumb I leave. Is the best are yet to come, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on Athena. I think Athena's my favourite of the humans, I think, simply because of how she managed to turn things around in case 2 at the end of it, and like how she really pulled out the stops I didn't believe the character was capable of. But again, I'm not really 100% familiar with the Phoenix Wright backstory of things like that, but I am getting a lot of vibes that a lot of people have made this comment already, like EOJ treats Athena better than the original game series did. Yes. I think a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people say that, and that based on what happened, I think, despite not having played a lot of the games, I think I totally agree with it. Like, it's a really good character arc that she's got, and she manages to, despite the pressure that Luna puts on her in the case, she manages to pull through in the end, which is really surprised me. And Athena's a really great character, and develops over that case. I like to see more what happens with her in the future cases. From the ponies, that's, again, probably Sonata again, simply because of the connection to Turnabout Storm, of course, and I'm interested to see what happens with her, because like she's starting to be, with case 3 onwards, she's starting to get a more of a bigger role. She's starting to move into center stage, if you like. She was more in the background in the previous cases, but now she's moving into the foreground now, slowly but surely. And I want to find out how she handles the case with Phoenix as her co-counsel. I've only seen 3-1 though thus far. I've only seen a little bit of 3-2, so I might ration the rest of case 3 up to this. I might do one episode a month. I might do that. I literally stopped at 3-1, I think, just before you made the emergency announcement on Twitter, but then I stopped at that point. So I think I'm going to like ration it up until maybe one episode a month, and then like that'll be my fill. But like what I did with case 2 was just binge the hell of it straight through, which is like, oh. But Sonata and the design, I love the design of Sonata as well. Like, again, with I'm a simpleton. I love the suit and tie. I just love that she wears a suit and tie now, just to a little nod to prove that she's now She's now a professional lawyer now in her own. Even though she's barely just get onto the profession, she's now.
She's herself. She's a new character.
She's herself now. Exactly. That's what I was looking for. I just couldn't put it into words, but yes, exactly.
Oh yeah.
She's now her personality is now. She's now her true self now, and she's now able to use her abilities for good rather than to manipulate people and stuff like that. But as was the case in Turnabout Storm, of course. Again, a bit spoilerific, but yeah. So it's really, really cool for that is happening now, and I really want to see what happens next. So I'm excited to see what happens. Maybe perhaps like she'll get accosted by Luna and the rest of the cast and stuff, but based on what she's done thus far. But yes, really interesting thus far, and can't wait to see what happens next. But I'm just gonna have to be patient for 2025 now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will correct you on one thing though, because I think you're just because you've only just seen 3-1, that's fair that you would have done that. Don't just assume that the suit implies good, and don't just assume good things will happen. Yeah, I won't say why, but let's just say that unlike in case 2 where I said before, one of my biggest gripes is just that things kind of ended simply. That's not life, and that's certainly not what we're dealing with. So yeah, just look at what characters are wearing.
Drop in a little hint that, oh shit, what's going to happen next?
Look at what characters are wearing, definitely. Try to identify, and I'm glad that you to kind of like take away from the hint a little bit and to deflect a little. I'm glad you kind of see that suit and tie, because one of the biggest things that we have a gripe with, mostly actually the person I like to call the Encyclopedia Britannica of Ace Attorney in our team, James Jim Boot, who's also British. Yep. He's he always laments the fact that well, I don't think he laments it as strongly as some people, but the fact that obviously Sonata and Mia Fey are so closely entwined as kind of like seemingly the same identity, and that's just not the case. Sonata is not Mia. And I think the kind of connection between the two was really badly portrayed in Turnabout Storm. What connection that was attempted to be shown anyway. There was actually a fun discussion he was making a point of literally this week in the writer's room about how the scene where Mia appears next to Phoenix while Sonata's on the stand is a bad moment to really use, because it doesn't have the same emotional weight that it has in Trials and Tribulations when Godot sees that very same segment, because there's no connection between Sonata and Mia. That it just isn't. But people obviously present that thing. So I really would encourage people to look at these characters and look at them deep. People are really confused about Luna's actions as another example.
Yes. I forgot to mention that. I'll let you finish your point first. I will get to that, but I'll finish your point. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like Luna, I'll probably answer it with the terrain I'm about to go on, but like Luna's character is confusing for a lot of people, and I think the awesome fact is that everybody's missed the clue that we've dropped. There is a clue there. There is something there that you should have picked up on if you've watched. You don't need to. It's not in the main series. It's in the side. But there is just something that people aren't doing, which is actually thinking about what is being said. And I think it's a bad thing that Case 2 did to everybody, which is another reason I don't like it as much. There's too much like giving the information, or like, this is how you should feel, this is the thing now, this is this, there was so much information thrown. Like Case 3 does even worse when it comes to information being thrown, but it's not information you're supposed to just accept there. It's something you got to sit on and think about, and you can sit on and think about. Not the same, unfortunately for our characters, they don't get the same luxury, because you've got to remember that this is like the time since Sonata meets Rainbow Dash to the point of her first day in court is like the same day, so there's not much time. But for the audience, for everybody else, like, go back, review, slow down, think more critically about what you're hearing, because it isn't just a case of like, wow, Luna is angry. It's like, we have an idea. There is an idea. I can assure you, have faith. And I know people do have faith, because otherwise they wouldn't be watching, but there are some really cool things, some really awesome things that some of the writers and non-main series writers who've done some of the side series have put into the content to give that indication. And only a few people have cracked it. Only a few people have actually gotten it. I've seen some people say it, and those people who have noticed it have an appreciation. They understand the characters now, why they're doing what they're doing. But it's
Yes, exactly. Yes.
it's there. It's there. That's the key thing I want to get out there. Don't just take things at the face value. We're no longer going to have sad scene make you feel sad. It is person displaying this emotion, but why? And that is the last thing I will say on that.
But yes, so yeah, when it comes to Luna and stuff, again, as you were saying, I'm not saying I've got the story figured out. I've got my assumptions. I think I've got a decent idea of based on what I've watched so far, anyway. Like what's going on. You got to try and pay attention to what's going on under the surface. Why is Luna acting like that? Why is Luna treating Athena like that? Why is she being evasive with things? Why is she not being direct with other things? I've got the impression that Luna is, well, of course, she knows a lot more than she's letting on. That's the crucial thing to look out for, I think, with Luna especially. And you also got to look at. I've got the impression that she's trying to control. She's trying to control the narrative, but Athena, the way she's trying to retort with her arguments, Athena's like inadvertently derailing Luna's plan. I think Luna's got something's going on with Luna, but like hasn't been addressed yet in case 3 onwards. That's what I'm getting. I'm not going to say any more about that because again, I want people to watch the series and make up their own conclusions. But and Luna's really interesting character, and like and I get the idea that some people you can't play the characters identically as they were in the TV series. That would be too obvious. So you do have to have a bit of poetic license with how they act and things like that. You've got like a framework, of course, and the writers have to work within that to a degree.
Yes.
But if you stick too hard to the TV series formula, it will be far too obvious and there'll be no plot and it won't be interesting. So I can see what the writers are trying to do and like are accomplishing. I think that what's happened thus far is very, very good. Everything's not as quiet as it seems, and with some of the characters, that's just a couple of characters I've talked about. Athena and Luna are definitely the highlight of Case 2 for me. The interplay between those two characters and how they play off each other, and both characters are unsure of what the other is capable of. They've got a rough idea, but they don't really know the full information, partly because Luna's obfuscating a lot of stuff, and Athena, of course, like isn't really sure of what Luna is, what her motivations are entirely. She's got a rough idea again, but it's a lot of it is assumptions. So there's a lot of the interplay for me is really, really interesting for me between the two characters. I wasn't really concerned about the end game of Case 2. I was interested between the two characters, the interplay between those two. That was the highlight for me, and like, I got a lot out of it just by focusing on those two. But again, we can spend hours and hours and hours and hours speculating and delving into the specifics of it. But again, yes. So, but there's a lot to take in. But yeah, very, very, very interesting. But I don't think I necessarily agree with the assessment that Luna's too angry. Like, well, yeah, there's a reason why she's angry. You know, you really think about why she snapped at Athena and like that and stuff like that. So there is reasons if you want to look for it, but you might need to pay a bit more. I'm not, of course, could this come from the Simpleton again? It's just maybe watch the series again, watch the episodes again, and maybe look into it a bit deeper and think of the things running on underneath everything. But anyway, I'm waffling on at the end. I'm happy to talk to you until the cows come home about the series. I'm absolutely having a whale of time watching it. But I think after over 3 hours of recording, crikey O'Reilly, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Mr. G. I hope you've enjoyed your podcast interview, your interrogation, if you like. Hopefully you've had the chance to talk a bit more about the hiatus and the series as a whole and stuff like that. I hope you've enjoyed your stay, as it were.
Yep.
I'm more than thrilled to get you on the show at some point in the future. If you're interested, we'll probably sort something out. So you're still working in the background, of course, but
Yes.
like as I say, like that's your priority right now, to get back on track for next year and take things one step at a time, as I say. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm happy to talk to you for hours and hours on end, but I'm pretty sure you haven't eaten all in the last 3 years.
No, I haven't. No, I just got...
leave me alone, I'm hungry.
No, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. But yeah, no, I definitely need to get some food, and I've got a games night with the team, as I said, that I need to get to. So it'd be good time it's good time to wrap up.
I love having loads of content. I'm happy as a clam. I've got my work cut out next few days, getting everything edited and released and all that jazz. So thank you so much for talking to me. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the podcast. I don't know who's going to be on next. Again, it's a case of who I can get on the show, basically. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. So thank you, Mr. G, for talking to me, and thank you to listeners and watchers of EOJ for tuning in. Please do check out the previous episodes I've recorded. I'm quite fond of a lot of them, so please do feel free to check out the previous episodes. Thank you much for listening, everybody. Take care. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to this rather lengthy podcast, nearly 3 hours long. Thank you so much for listening to myself and Mr. G ramble for nearly 3 hours. Thank you so much for listening to both of us. As I say, I don't know who's going to be on the next episode of this podcast. It's still very much up in the air. But if any other members of the EOJ team are interested in coming onto the show, please do get in touch. But as I say, I don't want to interrupt people while they're on the hiatus, of course. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Take care, everybody.